What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to episode number 93 of the RDO podcast with the VK bros, Jason and Alex on Cannell. Today's going to be the big federal elections special. We've got, obviously, we're recording this on Thursday, the 12th of May. We are about a week and a bit out from the federal election. Obviously, pretty important time. One of the most important elections in recent memory, I believe.
I think so.
So we're going to get into a little bit of information today in regards to things like policies from the major parties, some of the minor parties, which are starting to, I guess, get a little bit of traction as well. And we are just going to run through some of the policies because, unfortunately, one of the things that I think, to make an assumption, I think the majority of Australians do not check policies or read policies before picking a party to vote for.
It's not their fault either because the governments don't talk about policy.
That's right.
They don't advertise on policy. All the billboards are about trying to shit can.
That's right. Negative advertising.
Yeah.
So we are going to go through some of the policies today. The purpose of this is not to tell you guys who to vote for. The purpose really is to bring some of the policies to light that you may not have even known about, which might even open your eyes to, hey, I haven't even thought about voting for that particular party. Maybe I'll do a bit more of my own research into them and make it a bit more of an informed choice. Obviously, when we do talk about policies, we are going to be fairly biased in regards to which policies we think actually work for us. Our situations are probably going to be different from yours, so certain policies might benefit you, certain policies might not. So at the end of the day, all we want to do is try to not educate, but
just highlight,
shine a light on some of these policies and help you guys make a more informed decision. But before we get into that, there's a couple of little things that Alex just wants to clear up from big things happening around the world.
First thing is, which I didn't enlighten you about before, and it is a bit of a kick in the nuts for myself, but going off our very sensitive topic last week, I was wrong in how I didn't think anything was happening in that schmishmortion space,
right? But
there actually is.
Okay.
So we'll have to reignite that Tinder box another time.
Right. Are you going to explain what you're wrong about?
I thought it was purely an opinion piece, and that's why there was no point in going into it. But now there was a Senate hearing in America. And there was a vote, so it has actually moved. It has actually something has changed there. So let the games begin.
Okay. Yeah.
I got that wrong. I called that one wrong.
And just one thing I'll say on that too, because obviously last week was a pretty polarizing episode, and we did get a bit of feedback, and some of it was like the thing that I love about the feedback the most is that the feedback itself was super balanced.
Yeah.
So we know we're not going to get stuff right every single time. What we try to do here is discuss topics in the most open way we possibly can. We admit when we're wrong.
Yeah.
And we want discussion. Like these are big issues, and they should be spoken about. And the problem is, I think too many times the right people don't discuss these hot button topics purely because something could possibly go wrong when you do. I want to say thank you to everyone who did reach out and give you feedback.
Yep.
We definitely take it all on board. And I really, really like the fact that the people who did, it was just balanced feedback. It wasn't just, no, you guys are wrong because of this. It was, hey, I don't agree with you on everything that you said, but these are some good points. This is my perspective on it.
I think that's one thing we tried to get from the outset on this show is that we want to learn how to not debate's not the word, but how you can bring up a subject and how you can. You shouldn't just be hard and fast in your. You should always be open to new ideas. 100%. So I think, and I was wrong. Some action has happened. There'll be more that happens in this space. I thought it was a nothing story last week, but I was wrong.
Cool.
Now, next thing is, I had drums on my phone. Someone at the gym smashed the screen on my Pixel. Took it to the shop to fix it, $530 to get a new screen repair. Now my fingerprint scanner doesn't work. I did a bunch of research myself. The shop is saying that Google's not allowing them to access the configuration tool, which is confirmed by my research as well. And I'm like, well, that's if I had the option to spend $530 and not have the phone back in the same state, I would have made a different choice. Working through that, they've offered to give me a full refund, but they want another go at fixing it. I've got to send it away. So my whole business is on my phone. I'm addicted to my phone. I need it, so I went and bought another phone. And I joined the dark side again, and I bought an Apple.
Welcome.
Yeah, okay, so now why did I do that? I did that because I'm sick of the support, the Android support. Samsung was good. Samsung was always good, but you always had to send your phone away. I liked being able to use like an aftermarket guy, bing, bang, boom, in and out. I go to Optus to try and buy one outright. I buy all my phones outright because I turn them over like every 8 months. So I go into Optus. Do you have one of these in stock? I want an iPhone 13 Pro in blue. Yep, we've got them in stock. Sitting here ready to go. Okay, how much are they outright? $1,800 bucks. Yeah, okay, cool. I'll take one of those. Goes out the back, comes back. Oh, the manager says he won't sell one to you outright. What do you mean? And like, he goes, well, you can put it on a payment plan. I'm like, well, how much is it on a payment plan? It's like $140 a month. I'm like, yeah, but for 12 months. Well, what does that equate to? $1,800. So it's the exact same amount. Yeah. Okay, and what's involved with that setup? Oh, I need to grab your driver's license. We need to sit down. And I'm like, dude, I just want to give you money and walk away with it. Oh, let me review your plan and see if I can help you, because I've got 3 plans with them. Oh, yeah, you're on a legacy plan, so you'd actually have to choose a new one. Here are the new options. Shows the new options on the screen. It's exactly the same as what I've got now for $5
more money.
And I said, okay, so you're going to make me jump through these hoops just so I can pay you more. And completely upend my own strategy the way that I want to do it. I want to own that thing myself, right? So you're going to make me buy it from somewhere else? Wow. I said, can you see how fucked that is? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, there's nothing I can do. And he goes, there's low stock. So lucky that happened though, because I put the word out. And shout out to Chris, hooked me up. Apple employee, got an Apple employee, got the staff discount, paid $1,440 for the phone, picked it up the next day, and the service was impeccable. I walk into the nice shop in the city in Brisbane. Oh, hello, Alex. You'll just wait over here and someone will be over with you just in a moment. Wait 45 seconds. Guy comes up with the nice little bag sitting up over there, and the device, but not in the bag. And he goes, oh, here's the device. It's just confirming it's blah, 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 blah. These are things that you need to know. Are you coming from it? And ran me through it. Did a presentation. Now, I needed to ask how to get my stuff off Android to Apple. Come this way, sir. Sit down. Like, extremely premium.
Well, he's a genius.
He's a genius. Now, the swap over process was not as fluid as what I would have liked. I know Apple to Apple's really, really good.
Apple to Apple is the best.
Google to Google's really, really good too. It's very easy. You just sign into your accounts and it's basically there. But it wasn't difficult. And I have to say, like, my review on the Apple battery life, insane. So I've only got the 13, not the 13 Max, because I wanted to go smaller this time for my tight pants. I got 20% battery life, so I'm on my phone at like 6 a.m. And I get off my phone at like 8:30, 9 p.m. And I'm a power user. I'm on the phone all day, and I had 20% battery life when I went to bed. And my my Pixel 6 Pro, top of the range that Google offered, their latest generation phone, I would be at 20% battery life at 5 o'clock in the evening. So awesome for that. Some little niggly stuff like this doesn't trash all the scam texts. Like my Pixel does automatically. You don't even know you get them. But overall, I've been happy so far. But I'll keep you posted because I am very critical of tech. So I'll keep you posted. Now the next story. Cryptocurrencies. Shit the bed. Literally, like Amber Hearded their way into the red. Currently, and I'm using US dollars here, currently Bitcoin has broken the $30,000 resistance mark, which is not a good thing. where it's gone to 29. Currently, as we sit now, $29,867.
I think it was 2 weeks ago that you and I both said on the pod that we only see sideways movement in Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, stablecoin.
Probably another good example of how we don't always get it right.
But it's a great segue into the reason why it failed. There was a protocol called Terra. Terra, just another blockchain, but it had its own stablecoin. Stablecoin is like USDT, USDC, which is a digitalized token that represents $1.
Right.
So it should never move. It should always be one.
Yeah.
Right? Now, most of those protocols are pegged to the dollar by actual fiat money.
Right.
I.e., for every one USD Tether token, there is $1 sitting in a treasury somewhere at that company.
Yep.
Now, it's argued whether they have it or not, but that's the idea.
Yeah.
UST, which is the the Terra Luna protocol's stablecoin, dropped to 25 cents.
What was it beforehand?
$1. It's always got to be $1 US. It's got to be $1 US. It went down to 25 cents.
Yeah.
Now, the difference between that stablecoin, and most other stablecoins is that it's algorithmically pegged to the US dollar.
Right.
So it's not backed by a US dollar.
No.
It's backed by a collection of other assets, digital and I think physical, and the algorithm is supposed to do it. So the algorithm's broken.
Right.
Which caused a massive sell-off, and we're talking Terra at its high. Its high was $116 US.
Yep.
Today, right now, is trading at $1.15.
Wow.
And that high was at the start of the month. No, 2 months ago. 2 months ago.
Right.
Okay.
So is this Vladimir Putin's fault?
No, this is flat out. This is this company's fault. You got to remember that a lot of people, because they've watched this big rise of Luna, the token, there's probably stacks of futures trades on them. Everyone thinks it's going to ride up.
Yep.
And that's just completely caped the markets.
Right.
Now, are we in a bear market scenario now? Some say we are. Some say this is the same structure that the previous bull markets had, where
so again, just for non-crypto people, bear market,
people.
Non-markets people, a bear market is a market where everyone is scared and prices will tend to drop because people are fear selling. A bull market, when you're bullish on the markets, is when you feel very positive about them and there'll be more investments going into them, therefore driving the prices up.
Best way to remember, a bear market a bear attacks by standing on its back 2 feet and coming down on you and grabbing you,
right?
And a bull will hit you with thorns and flick you up.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, that's how I remember it. Okay. So we really need to see when the dust settles what's going to happen. I think Terra's done. I don't think they can recover from this. If
the algorithm's broken, you're never going to regain that trust. And obviously, anyone who's bought in at 100, what was it? 120? 116.
Yeah.
Well, they've done their ass on it completely.
Yeah.
And look, that you could hold it and hope for a recovery. That was probably what I would do.
Yeah.
If I was
I
in
know
that
a couple of
situation.
people that have bought some now at $1.16.
Well, it's not, and that
I get
that's the temptation.
Yeah.
Because that's the way that successful people make money in any market. Is you buy in peak fear and you sell in peak confidence, right? So I can see the temptation there, but with something like that, which is based on an algorithm which failed,
doesn't work.
It just doesn't work.
Yeah. So I just want to put this message out there because there's a lot of hurt. A lot of people, I own some $56,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't care. I'm rubbing my hand, I know this is what the market does.
That's right.
My comments weeks ago about it not moving was annoying, right? Do something. Do something. Now, obviously we got something. It's not the thing that we wanted, but this could also be the massive kick to the $200,000 Bitcoin that people are talking about.
Yeah.
There will be a point where crypto markets hit a certain level where they represent value again, and then people will pile
Of course. And one of the things
but do not sell is
Yeah,
So-
don't sell at a loss. Like, and especially if you're invested in something like Bitcoin. Altcoins, it's harder to gauge on what's going to happen with them
Yeah.
down the track. Whether or not they're going to have the massive bounce back is all going to be based on whether or not people actually see value in them and support the protocols. The whole point of Bitcoin is it is the digital gold standard,
Yeah.
which is the fact that it's a finite resource and eventually it will always end up beating itself.
Yeah.
It'll get back up there. So if you've got Bitcoin, hold it. One of the issues I think that maybe crypto investors, me included, haven't really factored into these sorts of widespread fluctuations in the market is that now that you do have institutional investors in the crypto space, they need to be far more proactive at protecting profits rather than riding out waves. So in other words, let's say that you had a superannuation company that bought in at Bitcoin at 50k and it went up to this is like Australian dollars.
Sure.
So bought in at 50k and Bitcoin went up to 56k and then they saw it starting to drop down again. They may have sold out a lot of their stake at 54.
Yeah.
Anticipating the downturn, simultaneously causing the downturn
Taking
when they've
9%
triggered
sort of amount of time, yeah.
That's right, when they've triggered a massive sell-off because of the sheer amount of volume they own.
Yeah.
And then when it hits the bottom, those are the same institutional investors that will buy it back in at a discount.
Yeah.
Again, at a massive volume, which will drive that price back up.
And I want to be real too. It's not just crypto markets that are...
No, it's the stock exchange has been just the same.
Did you see what Vanguard's ETF went to?
Was it like 88 or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine had only said a week ago, I put a buy order in at 88. I'm like, it's an ETF. It's not gonna do that. And then a week later, it did that.
Well, I was, to try to give myself a savings buffer, I went to sell some of my Vanguard last week when it was at $94.
Yeah.
But I was not at home, so I put in the sell order when the markets were closed. So you have to put it based on a
margin of
within
a range of...
That's right. Which the next day it missed because it dropped by $1. So then I put it in at a reduced rate for the next day and it missed again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, now I'm in a situation where if I sell it now, I'm costing myself way too much money.
Yeah.
So there's no point doing it, I'm just leaving it in.
Yeah.
But you're right, like the global stock market has had a massive fluctuation too, which again is one of the reasons why I think you're seeing this crypto sell-off, because all of a sudden people are probably just trying to do what I was doing. They'll go on, ugh, I see a downturn coming. I'm going to sell off some of these assets to just hold on to the cash to give myself that little buffer, because I prefer to sell it now while it's high than be forced to sell it later when it's low and lose money on it.
Yep. You'll never go broke taking profits.
Yeah.
So I love seeing stuff in the red because I've always got something. Part of my strategy, I've always got some money on the side in all my accounts, waiting to put in, to look for opportunities like this. And the way you got to look at the Bitcoin thing, you're buying Bitcoin now 20% off.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the way you got to look at it.
Yeah, it's a discount.
And even if you bought at the tippy top, I guarantee in years' time, people will be having conversations saying, can you believe I sold Bitcoin at $50,000?
That's right. Yeah.
I could have bought some Bitcoin at $50,000. People will be saying that.
For sure. Absolutely. And so the way that I've always looked at crypto, I'm not a day trader. I've always looked at it as long-term capital growth.
Yeah.
So for me, seeing the prices that they're at now, it's a great time to buy some Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? It's a perfect time to do that.
Yeah.
But again, you have to sort of assess what your goals are. Number one, don't invest more money than you can afford to invest. You need to have money there to operate your life.
Yep.
Because when these downturns happen, if you are forced to sell, that's when you make losses.
Yep.
But yeah, you need to... Crypto's great, Bitcoin's great, provided it supports your goals. So whatever if you want short-term profits, Bitcoin's not your thing. Like Bitcoin, just buying in now. Okay, let's say that you buy in now at 30,000 Australian. Is that what it's down to?
No, US. 30 US.
Oh,
That's
30,000
45.
US. Right.
I'll tell you, it is 43 Australian.
43,000 Australian. Right. So that's a fairly decent downturn. From about a week ago, it's about 56,000 Australian. So even if you bought in now and you got that uptick, you're only talking 20% profit.
Yep.
If you got an instant uptick. 20% is not that huge a profit margin if that's what you're looking for. There's other markets you can look at.
Well, 20% is pretty. 20%. I'll take 20%.
You would take 20% for sure.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that there are ways that you could probably make more than 20% in a more stable and sooner time frame. You could short.
No way. No. You're never going to make 20% stably. Never. You're only going to make 20%.
I don't mean stably.
Well, you said stably. In a more stable
did I?
way. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. No, I didn't mean that. Yeah.
But, so when I see red, I see opportunity.
Yeah.
Smell that?
Mm-hmm.
What's that smell?
Opportunity.
It's money, you jagged. No, what's the line from The Big Short?
Oh, I can't.
He says it wrong.
I can't remember. But that...
You need some sleep, man.
Yeah, dude. My life is chaos at the moment. Speaking of chaos, I apologise if you guys can hear any ambient noise in the background. We're obviously up in the Auto Bros shed, and the cyclonic conditions have ensued. I thought I was going to need to build an ark just to get here this morning.
But we're here, week in, week out, for you.
For you.
Like and subscribe.
Yep.
Send this to a friend. Send this to someone who hasn't got the diamond hands that I have and that needs the reassurance that they're not going to go broke.
Yep.
They're heavily invest in crypto markets.
Yep.
Send them this. Tell them to like and subscribe.
Yep. Tell them not to listen to their parents who are telling them to sell it right now.
Yeah.
We're 93 episodes in and never missed one. So,
never missed one.
Yeah. We'll always make it up.
We do that for you.
For you guys. All right. Have you got anything else before we move on?
No.
Okay. So, obviously, the biggest thing that's happening in Australia right now is the federal election is due to take place next Saturday, which is the 21st of May, 2022. Now, early polling has already opened, so the majority of people who know full-heartedly who they're going to vote for probably already voted by the time this drops.
Right.
But I also know that many Australians are not politically engaged, and therefore we generally leave this until Saturday to go and vote. So what we wanted to do today is we wanted to highlight the policies of 6 of the main parties, which we believe obviously are worth looking at. Now, the Liberal National Party, obviously they're the incumbents. We're going to look at them. We're going to look at the Australian Labor Party. We are going to look at the Greens. We want to look at One Nation, we want to look at the United Australia Party, and we also want to look at the Liberal Democrat Party, which are starting to get a lot more traction at the moment.
Yeah. Now, one thing I just want to say is we're going to stick to policy. We're not... I want to sort of preamble this with, we know, no matter what is said here, does not mean that any of this stuff is going to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
History has shown that you can say whatever you want here, and you can enact it later. But I suppose what we're looking for is a bit of a theme, a bit of a maybe a nuanced view on the way that these parties think that us as a nation should move forward. And the first thing I want to say too is people should take Australia out of their political names. Isn't it obvious? We don't need to market it to a global, like it's only for us. Yeah,
that's a fair point.
Yeah,
fair point. But yeah, that's probably something that I would say as well too. One of the things that is tricky about politics...
We should start our own political party called the Zimbabwe Federation Liberation Front.
Yeah,
that's an Australian political party.
That's a really stupid idea. So one of the tricky things about...
It's as stupid as saying Australia for an Australian political party.
It's not. It's nowhere near as
stupid. You don't have to name it. You don't have to name it the country that you're in.
Well,
it's obvious.
The only one that we've spoken about is the United Australia Party, which their party would indicate that they just want to unite Australia. So I don't think that's really that dumb at all.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
So this is
wrong again?
Yeah.
This guy.
Yeah, can someone timestamp that one for me? Yeah, so one thing I will say is obviously policies are great. Now, what's the key to all of this is whether or not they've actually got enough support for those policies to be able to push them through. Now, in the last 3 years, we have seen a lot of the things that the LNP government, for example, campaigned on, they haven't been able to or have chosen not to achieve. 2 of which were the religious discrimination bill and also the... oh no, why is it?
Was it some technical stuff?
Oh, no, the federal ICAC, sorry.
Yeah.
Federal Anti-Corruption Commission. So both of those things haven't happened. Now, they had a crack at the religious discrimination bill, which got shot down. And I think they're going to have another crack at that anyway. But the federal ICAC hasn't happened. Now,
That's never going to happen.
that will never happen.
No one's gonna introduce policing themselves. No one in work goes, you know what I need? A manager.
Yeah.
I need someone looking over my shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, it's never going to happen. It's a pipe dream.
I need someone to grill me publicly about all the dodgy shit that I'm doing.
And the ones that exist are pretty toothless anyway.
Yeah, so
that's on us.
We won't get too far.
The anti-corruption is us. Get them out.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's unfortunately one of the things that we've gotten far too used to in this country, in my opinion, is that we are like, this is South Park said it 20 years ago. It looks like, because the way that the media portrays the election is that it's a choice between Liberal or Labor, ScoMo or Albanese,
Yep.
ScoMo or Albo. It's literally that you can either vote for a giant douche or a turd sandwich.
Yeah.
That's what we're getting. But it actually doesn't have to be that way. And something that all of us as Australians need to open our eyes to, and you can apply this to your own workplaces. We have all worked in a workplace that we've worked for a manager who is terrible to work for because they've got no accountability. The only way that we can actually get what we want from the people that we entrust to run our country at 3 years at a time is to make them accountable.
Yeah.
And what accountability comes down to what is important to you as a voter. Because obviously, like I said before, all voters have different personal situations and are after different things. So if you feel like the incumbent government has done well in the last 3 years, that's totally fine. It's completely up to you. If you feel like they haven't, hold them accountable.
Yeah.
But as I had someone say to me the other day, holding them accountable doesn't mean just vote for the Labor Party. Because that was a sales pitch I received a few weeks ago, which was, if you're not happy with the current government, well, the only way to hold them accountable is to vote for Labor.
No, it's not the only way. It is a way.
It is a way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, let's kick on.
Cool. So let's start with the LNP, the Liberal National Parties. So, I guess
what we've done is we've got all the pages open, and we're
Yeah.
just going to go over what they're saying their plan is.
Yep.
A lot of them are formatted. The only one that we like the format of is the UAP, the United Australia Party. It's the only one that is laid out in a way that would suit this show. But
Yeah.
we're gonna do our best. So
Yeah. So let's start with LNP, and we'll go to, so their policy, so Australia's economic recovery. Australia's economic recovery leads the world, stronger than the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Unemployment is at 4%, the lowest in 48 years. Are we going to make comments on language throughout this?
no.
Okay. The budget also, this budget also delivers the largest improvement to the budget bottom line in over 70 years. Largest improvement from a very low baseline.
That's I love
We
that.
can't not comment on language as we go
we
through.
should. That's right.
Right.
And you've put us on such a low base. The fact any uptick was
Yeah.
easy, and you've created it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, like, you heard this stuff in the American presidential election and afterwards, where 12 months after the election, Biden was like, we've had the strongest economic growth in however many years. And it's like, yeah, because the whole place got decimated a year ago because of COVID.
Yeah.
All you've done is sat there and it's recovered naturally.
Yeah.
And then because we had such a massive downturn before that. Anyway,
Kick on.
getting back to it. So where it says unemployment is at 4%, lowest in 48 years. Also, obviously that doesn't factor in underemployment. Over 5 years, the budget will be over $103 billion better off compared to last year's budget projections. That's an interesting comment too. Because, well, how many times have we mentioned on this podcast, especially in regards to the pandemic stuff, you can project whatever you want. So if you project the worst and you overachieve compared to your own projection, you look like you're doing great.
Yeah.
So
All that says is that you've got shit projection as...
yeah, exactly. But anyway, our economic plan is working. JobKeeper saved 700,000 jobs. I was actually listening to ScoMo on Straight Talk with Mark Boris on the way up this morning. Was actually interesting to listen to. But he did say that number. Apparently, there's new figures out today saying it's 800,000 jobs.
He's good at that, though. Like, ScoMo is a showman.
Yeah.
He's the Hugh Jackman of politics.
One of the things that did come through, and I think Mark Boris actually helped facilitate anyway, whether it was pre-planned or not, but he did highlight the fact that what ScoMo was before he became PM was the treasurer for 3 years, I think 2015 to 2018, 2019. So he obviously knows how an economy runs.
Yep.
And therefore those skills translate pretty well when you're being grilled on like the economy and stuff. And at least from being able to make policy decisions based on an economy, having experience in the area is actually a pretty important thing.
Well, kick on. I have some thoughts about that, but it doesn't matter.
Okay, so taxes are lower for more than 11 million Australians and 3.6 million small businesses and sole traders. Australia is one of 9 countries to hold a AAA credit rating from the 3 leading credit agencies.
I'll give credit to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
That's the one big thing that,
There's probably...
We can get good tick here in Australia.
Yeah. And there has probably been more pressure on the economy this time around than during the GFC.
But in saying that, KRUD was able to maintain our AAA rating during GFC.
For sure, yeah, which is extremely impressive as well.
Yeah, okay, so, cool.
That is one thing I'm going to throw out there. Like, I think we said this before, but just to bring it back. I, for one of those people who I was not politically motivated up until probably the start of the pandemic. And even then, when I became more politically motivated, at the beginning it was more from a state level rather than a federal level. But I was one of the people who fell for the Murdoch media sales pitch of Liberals are better economic managers than Labor forever. And being that the businesses that I worked in prior to now were all essentially businesses supported by Liberal policies, I never shirked away from that. So I've always voted Liberal.
Yeah.
This year will be different.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show you that you are allowed to change your mind, like on.
Well, it's not changing your mind. It's actually applying your mind to look at it rationally
and engaging in democracy.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is long-term plan for jobs. Backing small business. Government's back small business with the lowest tax rate in 50 years, reduced from 30% to 25%. Introduce the instant asset write-off. To further encourage small business, $120 deductions will be provided for every $100 spent on training staff or digital technologies. 220,000 trade apprenticeships. To encourage apprentices, you get $5,000, or to $15,000 wage subsidies. Victoria, the first place in the Southern Hemisphere to manufacture mRNA vaccines.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome.
The technology that obviously doesn't work.
No, it works.
It's a good moneymaker. New funding will drive collaboration between universities, CSIRO, and industry to rapidly commercialise new technologies and clean energy, which is interesting because they cut a lot of CSIRO funding prior to this. Patent box for agriculture.
You'd stop at clean energy, but it says clean energy, medical supplies, defence, and other priority areas.
Yeah, this government didn't care about our own medical supplies that we made here in-house.
And that is a point that, again, I think we made that last week or the week before, but whatever side of the COVID debate you fall on, the reality is Australia had access to home-grown, developed and produced technologies from vaccines to rats to masks that we didn't purchase from Australian companies. We send our taxpayer money to overseas companies instead.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Nation-building projects like Melbourne to Brisbane Inland Rail and Western Sydney International Airport and Snowy 2.0 are well underway. Budget includes new commitments to road and rail projects and will build our future. Unprecedented regional investment will fast-track development across blah, 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 blah. Now, the one thing I do want to say from a small business point of view, the stuff that they offered, and I've said it here on the show before, the stuff that they offered small business, I got zero of. Every single one was a absolute showpiece.
Yeah.
Hey, go and get this. Here's some help. We'll go 50-50%, and we'll help you invest.
Yeah.
I can access none of it. I was sitting in a group of 5 other small business owners, and we're all in the same boat. None of us got a cent.
Yeah. So that is something important too, which you should look at and speak to your network. Is saying policies is one thing, but how did it actually play out in practice?
Yeah, it didn't.
Yeah. So
kick on. you do cost of living
Cool.
relief.
So the next thing
this is the one that I'm going to find really interesting because this is, I think, is the hardest one.
To figure out cost of living relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So cost of living relief. Events abroad are pushing up the cost of living at home. Putin's price hike, as it's commonly called. Higher fuel, food and shipping costs are increasing inflation and stretching household budgets. Now, again, one of the biggest problems of inflation is the amount of money we printed and borrowed during the pandemic, which they haven't left out.
Yeah.
The Morrison government is introducing a new temporary, targeted and responsible cost of living package to ease these pressures. For the next 6 months, fuel excise will be cut in half. Australians will save 22 cents a litre every time they fill up their car. Now, have you noticed a 22 cent a litre saving?
I did for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then it all went away. And diesel is $2.20.
Yeah, I noticed that too. So it's sort of like it came in when there was the enough press about it to put the pressure on the fuel pumps to actually lower the prices, and it slowly crept back up again. So they've just obviously built in a little bit more margin.
And diesel, where all your trucking, all your transport, all your boating's all done, that's skyrocketed.
Yeah. I'm not going to worry about their little breakdown of how much a family of
just flick through, otherwise we'll be here all day.
That's right.
Just flick through as much as you can.
Blah blah blah. Temporary reduction in fuel excise will not come at a cost to road funding, which will see more than $12 billion spent in the coming year. A new one-off $420 cost of living tax offset will be provided for more than 10 million low and middle income earners. This means people receiving the low and middle income tax offset will get up to $1,500 and couples up to $3,000 from the 1st of July this year. This measure comes on top of the $40 billion in tax relief already provided by our government since the start of the pandemic. A new one-off $250 cost of living payment will be delivered to 6 million Australians, including pensioners, carers, veterans, job seekers, eligible self-funded retirees and concession card holders. Together with existing indexation arrangements, this will see a single pensioner receive more than $500 in additional support just when they need it most. To provide further cost of living relief, 2.4 million Australians will get greater access to cheaper medicines. Australians will need fewer scripts before they're eligible for free or further discounted medicines.
So that does not fix the cost of living. Giving people money does not fix the cost of living. It actually makes it worse. So.
Yeah, and so this is, like you said, this is probably the trickiest thing and one of the most relevant things for me leading into the election is we are in a really, like, as good as we have managed our economy throughout this pandemic, we are in a position now where the reality is our debt has gone through the roof as a nation, and the interest bill on that debt goes through the roof with it. The only way to be able to pay that debt off is through higher taxation or whatever it is.
Raise taxes is the only way.
You need to bring in more revenue. Now, one way that you can bring in more revenue is by stimulating the economy to have that money flowing through.
Trickle down,
Trickle down. So then you get that money back in the form of income tax or GST or whatever it is. But as you said, it's every single time governments hand out money for whatever the reason, it generally doesn't make cost of living cheaper. It just means that money gets added on top of whatever the current cost is.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So
okay, so I'm going to try and blow through this a lot quicker, otherwise we'll be here all day.
Yeah, fair
so
enough.
The next section says supporting small business, which says the same stuff that we said in the first bit. So they've literally just doubled up.
Yeah.
Investment in skills, again, they've doubled up. That's what they said before.
Mm-hmm.
Stronger defence and security. I'm going to stay away from the defence and security thing because I would rather, genuinely, I'd rather us have a better relationship with our partners as opposed to... I love it how with China we pose up like that we want to fight you, but they're our biggest trading partner, and we're only pandering to because America doesn't like it. America doesn't have as close a relationship with China as we do.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so that's done. Turning regions into economic powerhouses. So this one I think is surprising. Liberal LNP is committed over $100 billion to strengthen regional economies.
Since 2013. So that's not a new policy.
Okay, that's what they've done.
Yeah.
Develop Northern Territory, building positions to gateway to Asia and the North. Strengthen Northern Central Queensland to grow the food bowl. Invest in Pilbara in WA to establish. So this is all just mining. We're giving miners heaps of money. That's what I get out of that.
Farmers.
And farmers. Although how come I don't hear about miners bleating for more money, but I hear lots of farmers? Regional package also includes major investments in water projects, new $7.4 billion invest in more dams and water projects, $2 billion in regional accelerator program to invest in skills, education, infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. That's easy stuff. Telecommunications package, that's easy stuff. Okay, building infrastructure, $120 pipeline, has already completed over 35,000. Okay, so they've already done that. Building rail, Brisbane to Sunshine Coast faster rail. Okay.
Yep.
Sydney, Newcastle, some rail stuff here. 500 million is being provided to local councils for priority projects. An additional 880 million will be connected to regional Australia with ports, airports, and transport hubs. Right. Okay. Better health and essential services. Government will be delivered. Increase federal funding to hospitals to 13.3 billion to 25.2 billion. Not sure if we're actually really seeing that.
No. Well, what's interesting, and look, obviously that's federal funding, so I'm pretty sure that the federal and states have like a 50-50 funding share at the moment. I'm not 100% on that, I could be wrong, but what is interesting is, so that was saying that they've increased federal funding for hospitals from 13.3 billion in the 2012-13 financial year to 25.2 billion in the 2021-22 financial year. Like you said, I don't know if we are actually seeing the result of that, because it's not.
That's just inflation, man.
But it also,
that's the same money.
Yeah, and it also seems to be every day. You're still hearing stories about ambulance ramping times, going through the roof. I've got a friend of mine who's an ambo who I've been speaking to a lot throughout the pandemic, and she basically said, like, remember we've spoken about before how they were like, oh, it's all because of COVID. No, this was a problem long before COVID.
Yeah, way before COVID. And I think the fix is not throwing money at it. It's creating better systems for, like...
Of course, so it's streamlining processes, so you don't have to spend so much to get things done.
And don't fire a large portion of your workforce.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next section...
that's interesting. The budget includes new funding for more vaccines, testing and treatment and PPE to boost our national medical stockpile ahead of winter.
Yeah, okay. We knew that was coming.
Yeah, more headspace services, community-based treatment centres and digital mental health support. It is interesting that there's a lot of acknowledgement of mental health issues now.
Yeah, like we didn't know that was going to come.
Yeah, a substantial women's health package including stillbirth and miscarriage support, new endometriosis clinics and greater access to breast and cervical cancer screenings, which again is something that we know fell off during the pandemic because those services weren't taken up by people.
But I always know that it's been pushed because I know there's a lot of advertising. Put in the comments below or reach out to us if that's not the case. But from a completely anecdotal point of view, I see that stuff being pushed a lot.
Yeah, from my personal experience, because I had 2 children during the pandemic, as much as they advertised these services from whether it was from a federal level or whatever, the reality on the ground was that these services weren't available.
Okay.
So, for example, with our first child, which was born in 2020, we did have some issues with breastfeeding, for example, and trying to get access to, there's like, I can't remember what they're called, but they're like specific clinics which specialise in that. They were closed. They weren't seeing people because of the virus.
All right,
so
we've got to fly through this.
Yeah.
It's taking too long. Okay, supporting home ownership. Now, this is a big one for me. Over the last 160,000 Australians purchased their first home. Home builder, first home super saver scheme. So all this stuff has just pumped the price of everything.
Yeah.
Home
so this is the stuff, like you were saying. So we need to focus on this because what is so tricky about the Australian economy is so much of it is based around housing, and all of these schemes.
Not housing, housing price.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, you're right. Yeah. But all of these schemes, they sound great to help people purchase homes, but you need to ask yourself, why is it that housing prices went through the roof when the economies were tanking?
Yeah.
This is why. Because when you put government subsidy money up against any asset, it just increases the price of that asset.
Yep. So the home guarantee scheme will now be doubled to 50,000 places per year. Single parents buy a home, they get a deposit as low as 2%. First home buyers buy a home with a deposit as low as 5%. Just an FYI, I paid 3% deposit when I bought my place, just as the GFC happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Hey, champ. Hey, is that Is that a signal?
Yeah.
Protecting our environment. Now this will be interesting, and interesting how low down it is on their thing here. Pathway to net zero. Everyone's talking about that.
Yep.
Highest uptake of rooftop solar in the world, which is not from the libs. That is a Labor incentive.
Right.
Okay. Investing in clean hydrogen, carbon capture and storage batteries and large-scale solar. I know that there's large-scale solar because I've got some mates that work on those things.
Right.
Haven't seen any clean hydrogen. Although I think some brands, maybe Toyotas will get it. Continue to reduce waste through recycling modernisation fund.
Mm-hmm.
Expanding Indigenous Rangers program to more than 1,000 new rangers, investing an additional $1 billion in world-leading marine science to protect the Great Barrier Reef, enhancing our scientific capability in the Antarctic, funding research and environmental management, providing $170 million to restore the habitat. So if you just do a quick swipe all the way to the top and then swipe all the way back down to the bottom again, it's the smallest. So that protecting our environment for the LNP is the only one that fits on my page.
Right, yeah, I get you.
Okay, and it's the second last, and the last one, you scroll down.
Yeah, I'm there.
And does this not summarise this government? Women's safety and economic security.
Yeah, it's literally last on the priorities list.
Last on the priorities list.
So the political party that made Tony Abbott the Minister for Women, funnily enough, has women's safety and economic security as last on their...
Female workforce participation is at a record high and female unemployment is its lowest rate since 1974.
Right.
Yeah, okay. But there is more to do. Okay, so glad to see that you've really prioritised it. Paid parental leave, 20 weeks of leave, nothing too crazy. 180,000 new parents who access paid parental service. Okay, so you're just doubling down on the paid parental leave. Budget includes a sustainable new women's health program, including stillbirth and miscarriage support, establishment of an same endometriosis thing.
Yeah, so that's just medical assistance that should be available anyway.
Committed $1.1 billion for prevention of early intervention response for recovery programs. Budget includes $1.3 billion to help end violence. Okay,
vague term.
Yeah, very vague. Frontline services, emergency accommodation, and support to access legal health service for women. Okay. Overall,
pretty lackluster.
Pretty lackluster. So that page. Think about how many times that thing was it was just copied and pasted from its previous. Yeah. So they haven't got a lot there. But let's move on.
So just one thing on that policy, because obviously now I'm in a family where I've had a wife who has left the workforce to have 2 children during this period of time, and obviously, so this is pretty relevant to my family.
Yep.
Literally, it sounds like the only thing that they're doing is they have just been able to make, and I don't know if this was the case beforehand, but so where it says more families will be able to access 20 weeks of leave, I believe that is the 18 weeks of the paid parental leave plus the 2 weeks of the dad and partner pay, which is what I could be eligible for, and decide how they'll share it between carers. So all that literally sounds like is to help women get back into the workforce. We're just making it so that the father can become the primary carer and take the 18 weeks so mum can go back to work, which in a practical sense, if you're breastfeeding, doesn't actually work at all.
Well, you could be chest feeding.
Yeah, well, it is 2022.
Okay, let's move to labour.
Yeah, look, put it this way, there ain't a whole lot in there for women.
Nah. Sorry, Dal.
Yeah, so that let's wrap that up. That's LNP for you in a nutshell. All right, Australian Labor Party. Let's roll through.
They've got heaps here. We might have to...
Let's just go through and pick out some, I guess, important things.
Because a lot of it's going to be the same sort of stuff. Make it easier to see your doctor. I know they've been talking a lot about that. Make it easier so they're going to bulk up nurses, which is good.
Yeah. Which Labor governments find.
Change the rules to allow regional and outer metro communities to recruit more doctors of their choosing, both locals and overseas trained GPs. Yeah, I'm sensing a lot of this. A lot of our issues here will be solved by getting overseas, migrant workers.
Yeah.
Which I'm not adverse to, but just don't whinge about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Expand the newborn screening program, increasing the number of screened conditions from around 25 to 80, improve pandemic preparedness and response by establishing an Australian Centre for Disease Control. We know how good the US one went.
That is an absolute waste of money, and it will have a negative effect on the country, which is what has happened with the CDC in America.
Yeah.
The CDC, if you look at the COVID pandemic, got just about everything wrong that you could get wrong, and was the driver of policy decisions in that country.
Yeah, unelected bureaucrats.
That's right.
Making
Who
decisions.
are accountable to no one, and they made decisions which made the situation worse, if not better. If you want one great example of it, is things such as lockdowns, when we know now that COVID is a disease that does not spread very well outdoors. What do? We locked people inside. So that policy in itself is probably single-handedly one of the reasons why the disease spread so much and became an endemic disease in the first place, because if you just let everyone go outside and get sunlight, vitamin D, etc., you probably could have had a different result.
Cutting the cost of medicine. So millions of Australians will save $12.50 on medical scripts under an Albanese government. Labor's committed to the cost of medication by reducing the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. Co-payment from current maximum of $42.50 per script to a maximum of $30 per script. Okay.
Right.
That's in that one. Have you got a...
One thing I will say is, and this is a biased thing from the way that I've always understood Labor parties in the past, but it does seem to be coming through in a lot of their policies. One of the things that has always been spoken about in Australian politics is that Labor spends heaps of money and Liberals then have to cut costs to get the budget back into balance. And unfortunately, with a lot of the Labor policies that have been announced, it does appear to just be around spending additional money to give all these things that end up doing is giving short-term relief, but then long-term pain when the, for example, one of the policies that they announced was Albanese supports a 5% wage increase to minimum wage to keep in line with inflation. Now, if you do that, it sounds like the right thing. And that's the problem with a lot of these, I guess you would call them more left-wing policies, is they sound at face value like they're the right thing to do by people, but in practicality, they can be either extremely difficult to do, or they have unintended consequences that you didn't account for. And when it comes to doing things like trying to arrest inflation, increasing costs for businesses by 5% for your staffing, for some small businesses can just result in things like not able to have as many staff on, so people lose jobs. Businesses can close down because, again, a lot of them are coming out of the pandemic too. Like, they didn't have it easy for the last 2 years. A lot of them are just on that tipping point where any additional increase in cost on top of the inflation they're already experiencing can make it even worse. And then the problem is, if you move the minimum wage up by 5%, a lot of times the inflation just goes up another 5% too.
Again, adding money to the supply does not fix it.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I've just seen here Labor's plan for cheaper childcare.
Yeah, that's infuriating me.
So this is a perfect example, and as someone who's got children in childcare, I'm acutely aware of this. So it says, only Labor has a plan to fix Scott Morrison's broken childcare system. Fees are up 41% under the Liberals. Now, there's no time frame in there, so I don't know when that 41% increase has occurred.
Simple.
Our plan means 96% of families are better off. That's 1.26 million families. No family will be worse off. No one should be penalised for taking on extra hours, extra days, or a job. Improving our childcare system is fundamental economic reform. How families will benefit. Blah, blah, blah. Labor will lift the maximum childcare subsidy rate to 90% for families for the first child in care. Increase childcare subsidy rates for every family with one child in care earning less than $530,000 in household income.
Yeah, this is crazy.
I'm sorry, but I don't think families earning $530K need childcare support.
100%.
They just don't.
100%.
You can afford the $100 a day if you're earning that much money.
I mean, Tasha's school, I think her school fees are like $40,000 a year to go to school. And if the school's full.
Yeah.
Right. So they've said that the cost of childcare has gone up by 40% under the current incumbent government.
So what are we going to do? We're going to fund.
We're going to jack it by 90%.
Well, it's not jacking it by 90% because the
Yes, it is.
No, the childcare subsidies are already like 76%. It's just bridging it from 76 up to 90, right? So it's not jacking it by 90%, but
Jacking
it
to
is
90%.
It is throwing more money at the problem. Like,
which doesn't fix it.
No, because all the childcare centres do is they go, oh, we're victims of inflation too.
Yeah.
And
100%.
they just jack the prices up as well. Extend the increased subsidy to outside school hours care. So they claim again that 96% of Australian families will be better off. Now, look, you might be better off in regards to childcare cost, but you're also increasing national debt, and there's some other things that could be part of that as well. But I just feel like that's probably a very good example of where, unfortunately, some of Labor's policies do tend to be about handing out money without taking into consideration the unintended.
But some of them have been very good.
effects.
Medicare has been very good.
Oh, of course.
Okay,
yeah.
so we've got great health outcomes, and that's a Labor initiative. So
Yeah.
I get it. If you so where they think that will work is if the yield, like if the total productivity of Australians goes up by more than that percentage,
Yeah.
then you get a good yield out of it,
Yeah.
and society's a better place.
For sure.
But unfortunately, what I think will happen, and there's no evidence to counteract that, is that childcare centres just absorb the extra profit and the price will go up.
Well, it's just like what we talked about with the fuel.
You're back where you started.
The fuel subsidy.
We've got to keep going. We've got to keep going.
But just to they've even got a breakdown down the bottom here of their high childcare subsidy, and it shows you by total family income how much childcare subsidy that you'll receive. So what I find interesting is with the Liberals, they cap out the highest family income you can have to still get any subsidy at all is 350 grand per household, in which case they're still subsidising 20% of your childcare costs. At the same figure, Labor's proposing to subsidise 37%, and then at 400 grand, they're still going to do 27%. At 450 grand, they're still doing 17%. At 500 grand, they're still doing 7%. I do not believe in this day and age that a family that's earning over $350,000 needs a childcare subsidy.
Nope.
At all.
Yep. Okay, next thing, I'm looking at a future made in Australia. So there's a Buy Australian plan. It said that we're missing out on billions of dollars of government contracts right here in Australia. They go to international competitors.
Yep,
100%.
100% agree.
Government spending and contracts is a significant economic driver in Australia, totaling nearly $190 billion over the last 3 financial years. We'll maximise the use of Australian-made goods, products and materials in Commonwealth contracts, as well as our plans to invest in a future made in Australia. We've watched that happen when state governments, and I think it was the Queensland state government that got rid of, she started buying, I think it was Anna Bligh, no longer drove Australian cars.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Fixing the NBN, Labor will secure more Australian families and businesses quality high-speed internet by expanding full fibre NBN access to 1.5 million premises. That has been a slow rollout. That's going to be really hard to do, but if they're going to do it, that's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Elon Musk has been able to cover more people in a less amount of time with Starlink,
Yeah.
and at a much cheaper rate.
Yeah. That was another thing that the Liberals stuffed up, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Labor will also keep the NBN in public hands, keeping internet costs for families affordable while ensuring improvements to the network. Yep, I'm good with that.
Okay.
More trains, trams and ferries built here. Yep, so we should build that infrastructure here.
100%.
Yep.
Yep.
Local defence jobs will come first. To keep Australia safe and regional peaceful, we need to invest in defence. Local government needs to prioritise local jobs and contracts with our defence industry. Yep, so keep that in here. That's cool. More apprentices, more trainees. Under Morrison's government, there have been 70,000 fewer people doing an apprenticeship or traineeship. As there was a decade ago, Labor will train thousands of workers. Yep, okay, I'm happy with that. Next. Powering Australia. Okay, this is. I think power is a very interesting hot point at the moment.
Absolutely.
Our plan is to create 604,000 jobs, with 5 out of 60 jobs created in regions. It will spur $76 billion of investment. We'll cut power bills for families and businesses by $275 a year.
For homes by 2025.
Yeah. Prioritise growth and investment for regions that have served Australia's engine room for so long. Okay, I'm yet to see how they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Benefits of the Australian economy backed up by the most extensive independent modelling. I hate modelling.
again, that's something that we've had big issue with during the pandemic, because
Yeah.
all you do is you model the worst case scenario, you overachieve, and then you pat yourself on the back.
So we will reduce Australia's emissions by 43% by 2030. We'll become Australia's target under the Paris Agreement, keeping us back on track for net zero by 2050. Look, I flipped and flopped on the whether we should do it. Yeah, we should do it, but we've got to do it smart. We should should be net zero. There's no reason why we should be net zero. It's just how we're going to get there. I'm interested to see how people are willing to get there, and it doesn't. LNP doesn't really illustrate any.
No, that's right.
Course together.
Yeah.
Labor's Power Australia will upgrade the electricity grid to fix energy transmission and drive down power prices, make electric vehicles cheaper with an electric car discount for Australia's national electric vehicle strategy. Adopt a business council to reduce prices over time. Okay. Protect competitiveness of emissions-intensive trade-exposed industries by ensuring they will not face greater constraint than their competitors. Ugh, don't like that.
Yeah.
Allocate $3 billion from Labor's National Reconstruction Fund to invest in green metals, steel, alumina, never heard of that, and aluminium. Clean energy component manufacturing, hydrogen electrolyzers and fuel switching, agriculture, methane reduction in waste reduction. Okay, so they've got something in there, right?
Yep.
Provide blah blah blah. Roll out 85 solar banks. Install 400 community batteries across the country.
Yep.
So a plan. They've actually got a plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Labor's will see join key trading partners in their ambition to 2030, like Canada at 40 to 45%, South Korea at 40%, and Japan's at 46%. Look, they've got a lot there. I don't want to go through all of it, but I would say they have a plan about powering Australia.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to jump online and have a look, because there are a lot of interesting things in there.
Labor's economic plan and budget strategy. Okay, again, I'm conscious of time.
Yep.
Okay, it's very small. It's very small. 5-point economic plan is calibrated to reduce the cost of living, drive productivity growth, and expand the capacity of the economy and alleviate supply side pressures, getting wages growing so the Australians aren't held back. Okay, so we've spoken about this before. They want to pump wages. I don't like that. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to make it worse. And again, the size of their plan is very small. Go and read it for yourself. Safer and more affordable housing. We've spoken about that in the previous one before. The government owning 40% of your property, we don't like.
Yeah, that is a very concerning policy.
Yep, but
very.
We've spoken about that before. Let's kick on. Equality for women. Now, this ranks much higher on Labor's than on Liberals. Australian women delivering cheaper childcare. Okay, closing the gender gap at work. Again, it's arguable whether that pay gap exists.
Yeah.
Providing the national leadership and investment needed to end family, domestic and sexual violence, starting with 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave, safe and affordable housing for women and children fleeing violence, I think is hugely important.
Yeah, I agree.
Hundreds more frontline workers to support women in crisis, consent and respectful relationships education to help break the cycle, taking real action to stop sexual harassment at work by implementing all 55 recommendations of the Respect at Work report and providing support for women who experience sexual harassment at work. Okay, yeah. So they win that. They win that.
I will just say on that note too, and I'm sure it's just because this is listed under a women's equality section, but a lot of that sexual harassment at work can go both ways. So if the policy is geared at being fair, if you're being sexually harassed at work, you'll be protected, that's a good thing.
Yeah, there's way more women being assaulted. You know that. Every Australian deserves... so now I'm looking at women's safety. So this is a whole different section.
Yep.
1 in 4 women have had a history of family violence. Okay, so it's kind of doubling up. They're going to have a family, domestic and sexual violence commissioner to act as a strong voice for victim survivors. 500 new community sector workers. Yeah, which I said before. So a lot of this is a double up.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just allocating showing how much money they're going to give towards it.
Yeah.
But look, they're doing more for women there. That's
100%.
Okay. Fighting corruption, I don't believe in.
Yeah, any policy on corruption, I just don't. agree with
protecting our unique environment. I'm guessing, I'm going to click on it. You click on another one. I'm guessing this is going to say a lot of the stuff that they've said before. Yeah, it was a very small thing here. Environmental approval times are blown out with 95% of key decision makers outside statutory timeframes. 510% increase in delays since Labor was in power, which I'd probably, yeah, I'd cop that. Okay. I mean, we've already established they're going to do more for the environment than what Liberals will. Labor's plan to improve the public service. This will be interesting. Play a role in serving our community, helping shape our future nation. Okay, what are you actually going to do? Organising a bargain collectivity. Labor supports the important role that union delegates play in representing employees at a local level. Well, I don't think there's any problem with state employees' money.
Yeah, and something that, again, when, like, it's good to say it and it's interesting to see how it plays out in real time. I think that there are a lot of people in the last 2 years who are union members who have felt extremely let down by unions. One thing that is well known about the Labor Party is that the Labor Party is quite often pushed around and governed itself by the unions that support them. And yeah, the reality of union support in the last 2 years has not been geared towards the individual workers. It's been towards the tying the party line.
Yeah. Well, how are we for time? What are we on time?
I think it's fine if this one goes on. We're already over an hour, but obviously this is pretty important.
Yeah. So just conscious that we want to kick on. So now we'll move to the... Oh, what's your overall feeling of Labor versus Liberal so far?
Look, my overall feeling is that I think this sort of falls in line with the things that they typically prioritise as parties. I think the Liberal Party typically prioritises the economy. I think that the Labor Party typically prioritises people, and you're seeing policies that are in line with where their priorities are. I think it is it's important to note that you can have both. You don't need to be, you can have a strong economy and protect women at the same time. I do think it is staggering how little the Liberal Party had to say about women's issues, which, again, will piss off the female voter base. I think it's interesting. Probably a bit of an interesting point is that my wife has told me she listened to an interview with Albo on Mamma Mia, which everyone knows is a female-oriented podcast, and they offered ScoMo to go on Mamma Mia, and he refused.
He asked to speak to the man in charge.
Yeah, well, he refused to go and be interviewed on there, and they were saying, well, he's not even trying to win over that base, but he basically said to them, there's no point me going on there because my votes aren't coming from your listeners. Conversely, Mark Boris, who interviewed ScoMo, like I said, I was listening to on the way up, had also put the invitation out to Albanese to go on that show, which he has refused. So both of them have realised what side their bread is buttered on.
Okay, so now we move on to the... Oh, I'm sorry, my view. I feel like Labor has more of a plan on more things than what the Libs do. And yes, I believe about the economy, they're probably not as great economically. But we weren't going good before COVID, and we weren't going... The investor class did really, really well. Which they're always going to do really, really well. I don't like...
I do note that neither of them has a specific policy on how they're going to manage national debt.
Oh, yeah. But look, we're always going to roll in debt.
Of course, but obviously it does need to be managed. And I do know that the UAP has a policy on it, which I actually really like. Which is the only reason why it's front of mind.
So Greens, how about... now, I'll just read this out in order that they have, because we're not going to go through all of it. So, but in order, they've said treaty and First Nations justice, tackling the climate crisis, a bold build for a strong, clean economy, protecting environment and animals, politics for people, better rights, more pay and secure jobs, public ownership, free healthcare for all, free education for life, equality and justice for all, building an anti-racist society, end sexism, our place in the world, responding to COVID, paying for the Greens plans?
So paying for it is last on the priority list, which again, it is in line with their beliefs.
Yeah.
Like obviously the Greens are a very much progressive party. They are people and environment first, and their plan supports that notion.
So the Greens push that. I'm trying to compare it up against the other parties that we've already looked at. So when I click on their energy, so they basically just want to eradicate coal.
Yeah.
Climate crisis. So they're just a plan to phase out coal is basically what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Our fully costed climate action plan will create hundreds of thousands of jobs, bring electricity costs down, and drive our economy into the future. Okay. We'll be making big corporations and billionaires pay their fair share in tax to clean up the mess they're making, fund the transition to 100% renewables, and kick off a full-scale renewable export industry.
Mm.
How do you export renewable energy?
Yeah. One thing I...
No, that's a real question. Do you
put solar in batteries and send batteries overseas on
then plug it
diesel-powered ships? Look, one of the things that does stand out to me, and so I'm on a bold build for a strong, clean economy.
Yep.
So the Greens plan includes using low-cost green energy to rebuild our manufacturing industry. We don't have low-cost green energy. So you can try to build towards that at some point, but the reality is at the moment, green energy itself is not low-cost. So you can't use...
Well, the end product is low cost. Like once you've built solar, it's effectively free. But you've got to build it first. And there are some solar farms being currently built.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have a solar run steel smelter.
Manufacturing plant, yeah.
Okay, so I've gone to the environment one, environment and animals. The Great Barrier Reef is dying, Murray-Darling Basin is collapsing, and a native forest being torn up. The Greens understand that if you want to protect the environment, you can create a strong, sustainable future for us all. We will back new environmental laws to stop corporations trashing our environment, put in place recovery plans for threatened species, and protect jobs and businesses that rely on the environment. Okay, yep, I'm cool with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This one's not as nice because it doesn't open a new page every time you click on another thing.
Yeah.
So I want to see politics for the people. I want to see what that looks like. People have lost confidence in politicians. Yes. There's too many dirty donations. Yes. Dodgy deals, a revolving door between politicians and big corporations, and no independent commission. I'm really sorry, I can't turn that. I don't know how to turn that off. I feel like it's... Oh, here we go. There we go. I feel like such a boomer. Big corporations, billionaires have too much power over politicians. We have a clean-up parliament and support a diverse local media that reports the truth so that politicians are accountable for people. Yep, I'm pro that.
Yeah.
The Greens will deliver a strong independent National Integrity Commission. We will lift parliamentary standards, establish donation caps, and shut the revolving doors between government and corporate boards. Yep, happy with that. That's a good policy. I like that. Which one are you on?
Yeah, I'm on the same one, but I'm just down the bottom where it has the actual plan. Was that what you were just reading out there?
Yeah, but I skipped over it.
Yeah, so what I do like, and it's obviously pretty key at the moment, but stop ministers taking cushy industry jobs in industries they used to regulate within 5 years of leaving Parliament. We've spoken about that before.
It needs to be 10 years.
Yeah, it needs to be minimum 10 years,
Yeah.
because unfortunately, we all know what's happening, and it happens every single, not every time, but far too often. Yeah, that's. I think that is really important.
So I'm looking at publicly owned services and assets. The government's job to provide things that we require. For decades, governments have sold off our public assets to big corporations and now source essential services. Liberal and Labor take big donations from big corporations. Now they control too many essential public services and run them for profits. So they want to buy some of that stuff back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pro and anti this at the same time.
It's a tough one because at the end of the
day, I believe
day,
it should happen. I believe I believe as a citizen, if we have the ability to have free education, it should be.
Yeah.
When I say free, paid for by taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
Because the overall outcomes are better,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so many efficiencies that need to be built in place first.
That's exactly
only
right.
the free market can do.
Yeah, and that's the same with education. It's the same with energy, like electricity. You would love to see you would think that as a nation, like one of the most important things for a prosperous nation is energy.
Yep.
Is being able to switch the lights on at night time, turn on heating in winter, cooling in summer, etc. it would be really, really nice to live in a world where those are state provided at the lowest possible cost because they're being provided as a service, not as a business to make profits.
Yeah.
That would be great. But you're right. It's what is scary is the inefficiencies which always creep into the public sector on just about everything that gets done.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one. I don't know the answers to that.
I'm reading some of the, like this end racism one. That'll be a tough one. We will work to eliminate violence against women and enact a human rights charter to ensure no one is stopped from asserting their rights and dignities. You do your research on that one. Responding to COVID. A pandemic affects everyone, but not everyone has the same resources to keep safe. Australia is a wealthy country, can fight the pandemic, ensure everyone's looked after. Put people first, not profit. COVID chaos.
They want to have a CDC here as well, which, yeah, like I said, I don't agree with. And the problem is too, so it would just be wastage. Because look at how we operated for the last 3 years. We took health advice from whoever it came from. The health advice was never disclosed to the public, but it was used to justify public control measures. And what would be the point of having a CDC?
The rules say, the history says this doesn't work.
Yeah.
All right, move on. Okay. What's your overall feeling on the Greens?
My overall feeling is they're everything that as described. They are definitely progressive. They definitely people first. I just don't think that. I think it's an ideal utopian world are planning to live in, which doesn't exist in the real world.
Okay,
that's my opinion on it. Yourself?
Yeah, it sounds very nice, and there will be a lot of minority groups out there that will be very pro, and I can see why they would be pro.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was in the same boat, I would too.
Yeah,
I think they're going to get a stronger vote than what people think.
Yeah,
and yeah, maybe I need a complete mental mind shift on how that can set us forward.
It's a tough one because I think about stuff like racism, for example, and one of the really tricky things with racism is I'm not an expert in it, and I don't consider myself a racist person at all. But it's one of those things.
I'm not racist, but
yeah, no, but it is one of those things where I just go like, in my head, it's like the more that we talk about it, the more we create it as an issue. You know?
I don't agree with that either because the easy thing to do is just to put it under and say it doesn't happen, but it does happen. It still happens now. It still happens now. So something needs to be done with it.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer for it, but will they do more for it than the other parties? Yeah. I mean, they've got a plan around it. No one else does. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they're looking at it means that they will do better.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? I don't know.
Yeah.
But they've got a plan. Mm-hmm. Okay. One Nation.
Yeah.
So their policies in order, which I find this interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Water is number one.
Mm-hmm.
Australian jobs and infrastructure, refugees, affordable energy and cost of living,
mm-hmm.
world organisations and trade agreements, citizen-initiated referenda, climate, family law and child support, pensioners, farming, foreign ownership, education, immigration, medical cannabis, illicit drug epidemic, stop the rorts, multinational taxation, firearms ownership, health, COVID-19 policy, pro-life.
Right.
Okay, so there's a lot there. I'll start with the water. You click on jobs and infrastructure.
Yep.
So the water thing. Now, just a little side note. The guy that predicted the financial crisis in 2008, Michael Burberry.
Burberry. Yeah.
He thinks water's going to be the next crash. Okay? Yeah, we've got heaps of it.
We've got heaps of it at the moment.
Politicians have failed to construct dams and expand our water's national security for our ever-increasing population. Instead, they have privatised Australia's water, and more than 20% is sold to foreign investors while withholding the records of those who trade in the precious commodity. Enough is enough. Mm-hmm. One Nation will build new water infrastructure projects, including dams, increase the supply of Australian farmers and growing nation. We will legislate the full disclosure of water ownership and ban the sale of water to foreign investors. Okay.
So
I like water.
the one thing that does stand out to me, obviously, about One Nation's policies, and it's the reason why they've been referred to as racists in the past, is that they are the first thing that stands out is that everything that they write about is about putting Australians first.
Yeah.
And you can call that racist if you want, but at the end of the day, whatever race you are, as long as you're an Australian citizen, their policies are trying to support you. So Australian jobs and infrastructure. One Nation supports jobs for Australians first and foremost. In an effort to bolster homegrown tradesmen and women, One Nation will increase its national apprenticeship scheme, whereby first-year apprentices receive a 75% wage subsidy, followed by 50% the second year, and finally 25% the third. The Research program in 2019 was taken up within 3 weeks by regional businesses. The second rollout of the program was again swiftly welcomed. The third instalment of this, of the strategy would be combined with nation-building infrastructure projects, including water, rail, roads, and energy. One Nation does not support casualisation of the workforce and instead embraces full-time jobs.
Okay. Refugees. One Nation favours Australia's first and foremost. We believe in reducing the refugee intake for 5 years in an effort to redirect critical funding to Australian services. The cost to Australian taxpayers to hold each asylum seeker or refugee in Nauru has escalated to $358,000 per month.
It is a
or
key...
$4.3 million per year. One Nation supports the withdrawal of Australia from the outdated United Nations 1951 Refugee Convention. Now, I don't agree with this policy because I think we need more intake, not less. And I think especially when we posture up and we support foreign conflicts, until we stop that, we need to be
until you stop creating refugees, you can't stop receiving refugees.
Yeah, we might not be directly involved, but we are involved. You know, so and I also think we're a country of 25 million people. There's some cities in other countries that have 10 times up our population, so we can take more. That's my view on it.
I do feel like that is a very large policy difference between them and, for example, what's sort of happening with the Liberals and also with the Labor Party, in that clearly there's been some people who've been put without work over the last 2 years and they're being replaced by foreign workers. And essentially this is the polar opposite of that policy. So obviously there's pros and cons either way. So affordable energy and cost of living. One Nation will apply a national plan that guarantees low-cost, reliable, dispatchable power by building a new low-emission coal-fired power stations. We will restore Australia's essential 90-day fuel security policy with onshore oil reserves and the capacity to refine fuels for domestic supply. Australia's abundant natural resources should be for the prosperity of our own citizens instead of our global competitors. One Nation supports the investigation of nuclear power in Australia. So first of the parties we've spoken about with a nuclear policy.
I'm pro that.
We strongly oppose the waste of multi-billion-dollar government subsidy schemes offered to foreign-owned solar and wind projects.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is very consistent about One Nation is that they often speak about the fact that, and a lot of people don't understand this, but a lot of the renewable energy technologies are heavily government subsidised in Australia. So whilst they may seem cheaper than people think, because they're actually being subsidised. And if you subsidised every other industry in the same fashion, a lot of other things would be cheaper. For sure,
but you've got to do it if you want to move there.
Of course.
Otherwise it won't happen. World organisations and trade agreements. The Australian Constitution must be upheld at all times and not undermined by United Nations forums and its 193 member states. One Nation does not support the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. Free trade agreements that function against the best interests of Australians must be scrapped. Import tariffs should be re-implemented on select countries to protect Australia's remaining industry and manufacturing while safeguarding homegrown jobs and wage levels. Okay.
We've all seen the impact of being not controlled, but having decisions governed by global bodies, which did not work. Citizen-initiated referenda. This I really like. One Nation will push for the introduction of a citizens-initiated referenda, enabling Australian citizens to put forward legislation or a referendum question without waiting for politicians to listen and act. This is a policy which is already used in our dad's native country of Switzerland. And one of the things about democracy is, so in Australia we've got a thing called representative democracy, where in other words we elect representatives to enact the democracy on our behalf. And I think one of the issues that you get with that is that often, and again, not all politicians are the same, but often politicians, once they actually get into the chair, they end up voting with whatever is in their best interest. And the best example of that in recent memory is the Victorian Labor government, the state government, which once you're in, you literally sign on to say that you will always vote on party lines, regardless of what your constituents want. And if you don't, you'll be removed from the party.
Yeah,
and
so they get the one they want.
That's right. So that's not representative democracy, right? So one of the things I really like about this, so in Switzerland, the way that it works is that if something is a big enough issue, like for example, gay marriage was probably the most recent time that we had a referendum. Essentially, you can put it forth as long as you basically get a petition, as long as you get enough votes to bring it to referendum. They then put the actual issue out to vote. The people vote on it. And whoever wins, it's just based on a pure majority. That is the policy for 6 years. It cannot be revisited for 6 years, which obviously gives you enough time to try to carry it out, sit with it, see if it actually works in real time, and it can be brought back up at a new referendum 6 years later. In Switzerland, they did that with vaccine mandates, which did get voted down. It was a close vote, but it did get voted down. And I do feel like this is something that
anything that gives us more power as people?
100%.
Okay, climate. Now, this is really, really long. It's a massive spray, but I've just scanned through it, and all it says is they don't believe in climate change.
Right.
And they don't want to, they're not going to buy into any of that. And they say that we're the only party that don't believe in climate change. So
Which I think is accurate. Family law and child support. One Nation supports the rights of a parent as much as the rights of a child. Children have a right to have both parents involved in their life if the mother and father are deemed to be fit and able. We also support the rights of grandparents when family relationships sour. One Nation strongly supports the implementation of a fairer child support system whereby the children are financially supported, not the ex-partner. It is imperative that Australia's family law system is made fairer to discourage expensive adversarial court action. Is that the first one of those sorts of policies that we've seen as well?
Yeah. And that's a real practical thing. Like, I know a lot of people that have had...
have
been stuck in that situation.
After working in the motor trade for that long, you know plenty of men who'd lost
pensioners. One Nation will advocate for a $100 a week rise under the work bonus scheme that would allow pensioners to earn up to $13,000 a year without reducing their pension. Work bonus scheme is currently $7,800 per year. We believe that you must have lived and worked in Australia for at least 15 years before accessing pension entitlements. One Nation opposes the increase to the age of entitlement to 70 years of age. That sounds pretty good, because a lot of people out there want to work, but they're stuck right between the position where, well, I'm going to lose my pension if I do it. So,
ScoMo brought that up on Boris's podcast in regards to, so again, I'm not 100% sure if this is true, so do some research into it, but with Labor's plan to do the 40% dual ownership of your property, apparently if you actually earn over the threshold, you then once you bought the house, you then no longer actually qualify for that policy, in which case the government then comes to you and goes, oh, hey, that 40% that we own of your house, you now need to pay us that back automatically. So unfortunately, any policy that actively discourages any member of a family to go and work or be productive, I think is a negative thing. As far as trying to drive the economy forwards, obviously the best case scenario is to have as many people working and contributing to the economy. So, like Alex was saying, any policy that at the moment with pensioners, they're literally, a lot of them want to work, and for a lot of older people too, casual work or part-time work is so good for your mental health, for keeping your cognitive faculties. And let's face it, a lot of older people have a lot of experience that they can offer. So whilst they may not be as productive in a work environment, they might also have experience that the younger workers can benefit from. So again, just to clarify now that Alex is back, any policy that requires people to opt out of the workforce to maintain some sort of pension, I don't think is a smart idea.
Is it you or me?
Farming. More than 53 million hectares of prime agricultural land is held by foreign interests. This equates to 14% of Australia's total 372 million hectares of agricultural land. One Nation will ban any further sale of freehold farmland to foreign investors and limit the sale of leasehold farmland to a tenure of 25 years. One Nation will also re-implement Foreign Investment Review Board applications on all agricultural land from expiring free trade agreements. We strongly support the re-establishment of a federal government-backed rural lending fund to safeguard Australian farmers throughout drought and other natural weather events.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that you're seeing now with food scarcity driving prices up. Yeah.
Okay, foreign ownership. One Nation will pursue urgent reform to Australia's foreign investment rules by legislating a clear definition of national interest based on national security, competition, tax, a character test, and any other impacts to Australia. Essential services including power, water, telecommunications, roadways and ports will be off limits to foreign investors. With the crucial shortage of housing stock in Australia, we must stop the sale of property to non-residents and non-citizens. That is one thing that will actually reduce the cost of housing.
Absolutely.
Because like you've got some of the prime real estate that's just been snapped up by overseas investors that don't care. Now that's a kick in the guts for homeowners, but you've all had enough.
And you're right. Like, as far as the policies that we have read out so far, one that will, like, everyone knows the driver of pricing is supply and demand. So if you can't increase supply fast enough to keep up with demand at the moment to lower prices. So how do you...
You can free up some spaces for...
Well, exactly right. So if you stop having foreign investors be able to come in and just buy properties they don't even live in, and unfortunately there are a lot of foreign investors who are, say, from China, backed by a Chinese government, buying up land overseas, that I think will make a real difference.
Would also stop large investment funds like Vanguard or BlackRock's coming in and buying everything like they're doing in America. Yeah,
that's a really big issue in America, where these massive hedge funds are buying up rental properties as they become available. So you've got an economic issue caused by various causes, causing people to sell houses they can no longer afford, being bought up by investment companies, which will never sell these houses. They'll just be rentals for life as an investment.
All right, kick on.
Education. Despite a $24.8 billion budget for state education services, Australia continues to rank lower than comparable high and middle income countries in achieving quality education outcomes. One Nation will restore critical thinking in the classroom and reinstate the cornerstone of education with reading, writing, arithmetic and discipline. There should be no room for Western white gender guilt shaming in any classroom, and instead children should be taught the benefits of a merit-based free thinking society.
Interesting. Immigration. Zero net immigration throughout COVID illustrated how putting the brakes on migration reduced congestion on roads and allowed government services to focus on Australians, which we didn't. One Nation will extend a zero net migration policy and focus on permitting only highly skilled migrants from culturally cohesive countries into Australia. Migrants must demonstrate a sound level of English for assimilation purposes. Education courses in Australian universities should not be used as a backdoor to immigrate to Australia.
Yeah, that is something that's been a policy before by many governments in the past, is to only allow migration of skilled migrants.
But I mean, then they opened up the floodgates and it was like, it appeared that only unskilled ones were here.
But like you said, like, again, it's a tricky thing because Australia could do with more people. Medical cannabis, whole plant...
I just want to, just before you say so I don't know what this is going to say, but you had predicted that the way to correct Australia's economy was to legalise marijuana. So,
well, you create an industry overnight.
Yeah.
Whole plant medicinal cannabis continues to act as a natural, proven alternative for chronic pain relief and other serious health symptoms experienced by Australians. One Nation remains at the forefront of advocacy within the federal parliament and will continue our push to bring the cost of access down. So, again, first
one to say it.
Yeah.
We know, like, America's doing it to great effect.
Yeah. One thing too that, just as a bit of an anecdotal story, I know someone who lives in Nimbin and has a deep understanding of the local business owners.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, there was a big push by police to remove people from selling marijuana in that town. Right. And obviously Nimbin's known for it, right? Now, what happened? They came in, they arrested the drug dealers. And the funny thing is, the majority of the drugs that were being sold in Nimbin's not a young person's community. No. It's an older person's community. The majority of the cannabis sales down in Nimbin are to older people who are using it for like pain management and stuff like that. So anyway, what happened was they came in, they arrested the marijuana dealers, and once they were gone, the meth dealers moved in. and it created a massive problem.
Decimated.
Yeah, so...
Well, that goes into the next one, which is illicit drugs epidemic.
Right.
Australia continues to rank a shameful second for the use of illicit drugs, according to the latest National Wastewater Drug Monitoring Program conducted by Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission. Sadly, Customs inspects only 1% of more than 8 million shipping containers that enter Australia ports annually. One Nation will fund the increase of scanning and inspection for containers through the seizure of assets and money from proceeds of drug crimes. One Nation will also establish a federal police drug bus in each state that will provide an education roadshow for parents and students. That's the only thing that's paying back the debt, is stealing money from drug dealers. But no, okay, I'm on that.
Yeah. Stop the rorts. Australia is by and large a very generous nation with government-paid safeguard services for the sick, unemployed, aged and disabled. For services of this nature to continue, we must prevent them from being rorted. One Nation will push for an identification photo to be displayed on Medicare cards to positively identify users and reduce the number of fraudulent claims made by non-Australian citizens. Interesting. Okay. We will stop the use of NDIS funding to pay for sex worker services. In brackets, a federal court ruling permits the use of taxpayers' money for sex workers under the NDIS.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Cha-ching! And One Nation will set the term of unemployment benefits to 3 years in any given 5-year period to end long-term unemployment payments to those under the age of 50.
Okay. Yeah. Multinational taxation. One Nation will oppose any increase in the GST as it will heavily impact on Australia's standard of living and further burden those on pension and low incomes. We will maintain our position to the reintroduction of death duties and pursue a tax regime that ensures multinational businesses pay their fair share of tax while operating within Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Firearms ownership. One Nation supports responsible gun ownership and will preserve the current laws which allow law-abiding citizens access to firearms, whether it be for work, farming or sports-related activities. We do not believe that further stringent measures or regulations are required regarding licensing. One Nation calls for stricter border security and tougher sentencing for gun crimes and traffickers.
So just so people know, there are way more guns now than when there were pre-1996.
Yeah.
When they changed.
Yeah.
You just don't see it. And look, it's worked. There is less gun violence, although there was a big shooting, gang shooting in Sydney today or yesterday.
Yeah.
But if you have more guns, you're going to have more gun violence.
Yeah.
That's a fact, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a very polarising subject.
That might trigger some people, yeah.
For
so
sure.
Health. Australia's health system was beyond capacity prior to COVID-19 and evidently inadequate in regional parts of the nation. One Nation recognises the need to bolster the number of regional doctors, nurses and other critical health professionals in order to encourage better regional medical services. One Nation will reintroduce 3-year contracts for newly qualified medical professionals and in return pay their HECS help loans in full.
Wow, okay, interesting. COVID-19 policy. One Nation...
You get the juicy one.
Yeah. One Nation opposes COVID-19 vaccine mandates on Australian citizens. One Nation will continue its push for a royal commission into the management of the COVID-19 pandemic for Australian governments. Again, first of the parties that are pushing for a royal commission into the COVID-19 pandemic, which I very much support. While we acknowledge that people have died from COVID, there is a noteworthy difference between died of versus died with. It is critical that an honest and thorough examination of how federal, state and territory governments manage the pandemic is implemented by the Parliament. We need a Royal Commission not to lay blame or find scapegoats, because the buck will always stop with the Prime Minister and state and territory leaders as it must in a representative democracy, but primarily to learn which pandemic measures worked and which didn't, so that we are much better prepared for the next pandemic, which Bill Gates just wrote a book on how to prepare for it, which means he's cooking it up at the moment.
Yep.
Those who fail to learn from the mistakes of history are doomed to repeat them, definitely. A Royal Commission of Inquiry will have the necessary power to compel the expert health advice Australian governments relied upon to justify and implement pandemic measures. Much of this advice has been hidden from the Australian people. We need a Royal Commission because this inquiry must be completely transparent to the Australian public. The Australian public deserve a comprehensive account of the decisions made by their governments to manage the COVID-19 pandemic. Very much agree with that.
Okay, I get stuck with the shit one. Pro-life.
This is not. This is your punishment for last week.
Yeah, this is not me. Okay, pro-life. Pauline Hans's One Nation acknowledges the scientific fact that human life begins in the womb. We are horrified when state governments pass legislation which legalise abortion up till the birth age. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to go through. I'm not going to read all this because.
I think a lot of this was covered last week.
Yeah. So they don't like it. Yeah. They don't like it.
They are pro-life. So again, to give our thoughts on One Nation. I think One Nation they're the polar opposite of the Greens in that their policies some of them come across as super negative in nature in regards to people. But the benefits to me of One Nation are they are an Australia First party.
Yep.
A lot of the things in there in regards to things like, putting Australians first, whether it's for workers or for foreign investment, are things that I do really appreciate. Again, I don't agree with every single one of their policies either.
Yeah, I don't. The one thing I would say is this is probably the most cost-effective one that we've read out.
Yeah.
They weren't just dishing money out left, right, and centre. They seem to have, everything had a real practical sense around it. Mm. It's been my favourite so far, except that last part. Yeah. I'm anti that, but can't win more.
All right, so moving on to UAP.
Yeah. Okay, can I start with this one? The home ownership. A maximum of 3% interest on home loans. This is so dumb. Liberal, so massive debt. Home loan rates to 4% in 2 years and over 6% in 3 years. At 4%, over 60%. They want to reduce. They want to fix interest on home loans. I don't like this. I don't like this at all.
Why don't you?
Well, it's the exact same reason. You're stimulating a housing market, and therefore you're going to pump the price of it up.
I don't think it's for new mortgages. I think it's fixing current mortgages at a maximum of 3% for the next 5 years.
Any adjustment to a free economy is only going to ruin it. Yes, that won't work. First $30,000 of a home loan to be tax deductible. Mm-hmm. We will make the first $30,000 paid tax deductible each year, which I think it is in America.
Okay, interesting.
The United Australian Party will boost the construction and industry and increase home ownership security. We'll make the first $30,000. Blah 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 blah. That policy gives rich people another lever to pull.
For sure.
Yeah,
it's an extra $30,000 a year they can write off on tax.
Yeah, but what you do, and then they invest that in stock markets and make even more money.
Yeah.
Okay.
The economy, repayment of national debt. Both Liberal and Labor failed to address $1 trillion of national debt, but not the United Australia Party. And that is something I mentioned before, that neither of them had a specific policy based around it. We plan to address it head on, save your family from its impact, and end government's over-reliance on taxation as a source of revenue. Australia supplies over 80% of all iron ore to the Asian manufacturing market, where tens of trillions of dollars are invested in manufacturing in China, Japan, Korea, and the rest of Asia. Asia achieves its position in world trade by using Australian iron ore. Asian economies and industry have no alternative. In the 1960s, Australia had an export licence on the export of iron ore. The United Australia Party will introduce a 15% export licence on the export of all Australian iron ore. The export licence receipts will be isolated for the sole purpose of repaying our national debt, which will relieve... Yeah, I've read this policy before and I like it. Which will relieve every Australian from that burden and set up our future. We'll do this so Australia can be all it can be without the financial destruction the Labor and Liberal parties have imposed upon our country.
Interesting.
So that, to me, is one of the most sensible ways to repay the national debt.
It's a resource tax.
It's a resource tax, but you're literally... It's like when Trump's like, I'm going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. You're getting foreign investors to pay down our national debt. I think it's a very smart thing. Yep. And I've been saying for many, many years, I hate the fact that Australia's national resources can be mined by companies and sold for profits, which we don't see. Yeah. The only tax you see is income tax, which they find their way around paying anyway.
Bring Australia's super home. Australia has over $1 trillion of superannuation invested overseas. Just like when John Curtin in World War II brought the troops back to save Australia, the United Australia Party will bring back $1 trillion of Australian super back to Australia to save Australia. That's interesting. Now, it would mean in the short term that our super would not perform as well, but it would be a massive bolster to Australian business.
Yeah, and like I said, like you said, I think it's a really interesting policy because you're right. I think the whole reason why you invested overseas in the first place is because you're getting a better return on investment. Yeah. However, in the short term, it might hurt, but if we can grow Australian businesses using that money, what's the long-term return on investment? Process Australian minerals at home. We can create thousands of jobs and turbocharge our exports by processing our mineral resources in Australia, leading to enormous revenue injections and better schools and hospitals. Australia is failing to maximise revenue from its prized mineral resources by continuing to send unprocessed ores overseas. The United Australia Party's downstream processing policy will see more stages of the mining process happen on Australian soil rather than offshore, resulting in much higher returns, along with stimulants to both economic growth and job creation. We can use Australia's mineral resources to kickstart our economy by setting up downstream processing in the states such as South Australia and Victoria that aren't resource rich.
Interesting.
Another policy I do really like, I often find myself, if I just want to have a bit of a brain break, watching Aussie outback opal hunters. Right? And it's the same format every show. Oh, we don't have enough money to keep mining. We just need to get our lucky break. Oh, look, we found some opal. This will just keep us going. But what you do notice is the difference between the people who just find the raw stones and the people who actually cut them and polish them themselves, and the yields that you get from those just by adding in that step is like 10 times higher if you're selling cut polished stones rather than raw materials.
In Australia's energy crisis, Australia has the world's largest deposits of uranium. However, while we export uranium to other nations for them to take advantage, we ban its use in Australia for electricity generation. The government should be proactive in establishing research into a new nuclear technology to help solve Australia's energy problems. China, Europe and the United States all benefit from nuclear power. Australia should benefit from our own resources, and Australian industries should be benefiting from cheap power so they can compete internationally. And just to say how effective that is, I don't know why. So France is huge. I think Germany's got it too. Japan. If you look at like the top 5 economies, they all use it.
Yeah.
And there's no that like energy is the key. So you can have like, if you put nuclear in, you can have manufacturing back.
That's right. Because we've said it before, everyone has this assumption that the reason why it's too costly to manufacture in Australia is wage costs. It's not, it's energy costs. Yeah. So you're right, if you bring in nuclear, cheap, reliable,
safe,
clean energy.
It is ridiculously clean, by the way. Yeah.
There is a lot of negativity around nuclear, which is based on 40 to 50-year-old technology. By Australian. The Australian government needs to support Australian industries and ensure that all its policies are for the benefit of Australia first and foremost. We must boost our encouragement to all Australians to buy Australian products and produce, with labelling and packaging regulations changed so Australians clearly know what products are Australian, helping them to make a choice to support Australian products.
Education, abolish HECS debts for students. A good education policy is not only good social policy, but good economic policy, and we believe students should begin their working lives unencumbered by huge HECS debts. Australian National Party will inject an extra $20 billion into the education system during our first 3 years in government. It's time to invest in ourselves and our next generations. If we don't have confidence in ourselves, who will have confidence in us? We must educate our children as our most valuable resource. We must make it possible for those to get talent to get to university, but we must also ensure those who are educated can find a job after graduating from university. That's why our ability to compete internationally and expand our exports is so important, because our policy to pay back the debt in Australia will forgive and remove all HECS fees. Not sure about that.
So that's something that interesting to me. Number one, it seems a little bit off-brand for the party itself, right? But in a good way, in my opinion. Number two, I do believe that having free education, free good quality education, is something that is extremely important. Yep. And as universities are one of our largest exports, like education is one of Australia's biggest exports, there is no reason why the exorbitant fees that we charge overseas students to come and study in Australia can't be used to subsidise, like partly fund Australian education. Yep. Because it is true. Like, at the end of the day, if we want to,
you get a yield out of it.
If you want to prosper as a nation, educate your people.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Employment and taxation. Change how provisional tax is paid. The United Australia Party will change how provisional tax is paid, relieving downward pressure on our small businesses and contractors. We will stop the advance payment of provisional tax, which is currently taken before profits have been made. The United Australia Party will stop this unfair tax burden and allow it to be paid at the end of the financial year, releasing up to an extra $90 billion to circulate in our economy. This in turn delivers GST revenue for the government and jobs for Australians.
Okay.
Interesting policy.
Tax relief on second jobs. We want to support all Australians who choose or need to have a second job. The United Australia Party will provide the incentive for people to earn more money for themselves and provide government with increased revenue. The United Australia Party will reduce the taxation rate on a person's second job by up to 50%, resulting in higher weekly earnings and boosting the capacity for people to cope with increasing cost of living. So I don't know how reducing that tax increases their revenue, but
I think it's because it encourages more people to get a second job. So if you encourage more people to make more income, then they'll have more income to spend, and it's that trickle down economics.
But there is no disincentive for a second job.
There is, because they tax you at 50%. So the tax rate is higher on a second job rather than a first job.
But it gets washed out at tax time.
Does it though?
Yeah. So it's anyway.
Abolish fringe benefits tax.
Thank
We
you.
will abolish the fringe benefits tax and free up long-standing blockage in the economy. Fringe benefits tax is a negative tax in that it stifles demand, hinders growth, and kills employment. We don't want to penalise people for spending money. Spending money makes the world go around, creates wealth, jobs, and makes the pie bigger for everyone. By abolishing FBT, we believe business confidence and opportunities for employees will grow.
I lived in a pre-FBT age.
Right.
And
It was prosperous.
well, you had the best company cars.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that came in,
This next one is policy.
Zonal taxation for regional communities. Our regional communities are the backbone of our nation. The United Australia Party is committed to stimulating economic growth in rural areas. Our cities are bursting at the seams. We face a future of heavy congestion, serious housing affordability issues, and mounting costs of living pressures. By providing a 20% tax concession incentive to people living more than 200 kilometres away from our capital cities, including Tasmania, we can decentralise Australia and encourage people to move or settle in regional areas. Zonal taxation law isn't new. It existed under Liberal governments in the 1960s and constitutional under Commonwealth law.
I really
like
that. It's something that is, obviously our partners are both teachers, so it's something that is apparent in that system is that they need to try to find all these extra ways to convince young teachers to move out to regional areas. This could be something else that assists that and assists
and
the
again
regions.
pushes the price of housing down in cities.
Yeah, and again, if you are concerned about things like climate change, if you reduce the amount of congestion on highways, for example, you have a net benefit.
Allow business to trade out of difficulty. The Australian government is the main petitioner of bankruptcy and company liquidations. When a business closes, people lose their jobs. The government then loses group tax, company tax, and in many cases exports and GST. As a result, services in education and health have to be cut to provide revenue. If the government stopped driving business to the wall, this wouldn't happen. We will restructure the system to keep businesses going and keep people employed productively. Now, I think Clive Palmer's probably someone that has been to the wall multiple times.
He knows what it's like to go from the window to the wall.
Yeah.
Freedom and Australians' rights. End lockdowns forever. Lockdowns destroy businesses, jobs, and the Australian standard of living. Lockdowns cause untold damage to both physical and mental health, and lockdowns cause more harm to society than any marginal benefits they may bring. The UAP policy is to open the economy, open the borders, and provide encouragement, confidence, and incentives for businesses, especially small businesses, to thrive. Free trade between the states and free movement of people must be reinstated. Section 92 of the Australian Constitution provides for the absolutely free movement of people across state borders. Australian troops must not be used to assist power-drunk state premiers in violating our Constitution. The federal government must ensure that the constitutional rights of all Australians are protected by exercising their federal jurisdiction.
Yep, pro that. No domestic vaccine passports. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Move on.
Respect the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship. Again, so these are all in the same vein. I think everyone knows the UAP's
Abolish national cabinet. Since federation, the Australian federal government cabinet has been comprised from federal members of parliament voted for and elected by the Australian people. The current Morrison government has imposed an unconstitutional so-called national cabinet that has no legal basis. The United Australia Party believes the so-called national cabinet should be abolished as soon as possible, with traditional government and freedom restored to the Australian people.
That is more important than people know.
Yeah.
Because one key point, we've mentioned it before, but for any new people, the National Cabinet is exempt from Freedom of Information Act requests.
Yeah,
so
right.
then the National Cabinet was run by ScoMo and the state premiers during the pandemic, and they made all of the decisions on pandemic measures in those National Cabinet meetings, and we will never be able to access the information that was spoken about. In a free democratic country, that doesn't fly with me. Protecting free speech from foreign tech giants. Foreign tech giants that operate as platforms, not publishers, such as Facebook, YouTube and Twitter, should not be able to censor Australian political debate. The United Australia Party will seek to implement laws preventing this foreign interference in Australian politics and our elections.
I hope that goes across everything.
It should go across everything, yeah.
protect Australian values. The United Australia Party stands to protect the values of people who build and develop this country. We believe the most basic freedoms of parliamentary democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of fear, and freedom of association. This includes respect for our constitution and the law that underpins our democracy, society that protects our rights, freedoms. Okay, that's a nothing thing.
Yeah. Lobbyists. The United Australia Party believes lobbyists should be excluded from holding official positions in political parties. Lobbyist firms often employ former ministers from both the major political parties, and big business can get policy changes by paying money to such firms to represent their views. You went down a deep dive on this before. This represents a serious conflict of interest and undermines democracy that Australians have fought for. Lobbying mixed with political parties undermines Australians' votes. A United Australia Party team will legislate to restrict the role of lobbyists in directing political parties.
And an example of that is when Clive Palmer called out Gladys Berejiklian and said that there was some vested interests, she resigned.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not because of that. Just a coincidence. Healthcare and aged care, giving hospitals the funding they need. Healthcare is declining. United Australia Party sound economic policy will provide $40 billion in additional funding for healthcare across Australia. I think everyone said that.
Mm-hmm. Increasing the age pension by $180 a fortnight. I'm a big believer in increasing the age pension.
Yep.
Like, pensioners have worked their whole lives, paid tax in this country. Again, like, I guess the One Nation policy that you have to work for X amount of time to qualify for it. But the pension's dog shit. If you're just trying to survive on that money, it's not enough money, especially when you're looking at things like inflation and stuff like that.
National security.
Yeah, let's not worry too much about defence stuff.
Okay, last one. I'm just concerned about how much space is left.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so we're up to the Liberal...
So what are your thoughts on UAP?
Very mining centric. Obviously, he's a miner. Like Clive Palmer's a miner, so
that's where his experience comes from.
Yeah, but it seemed like he's going to raise a lot of capital because of that. So that kind of part I liked. The freedom part I liked. I know it's a buzzword that gets us red pillars
jacked up.
Yeah, but.
The thing about him is, obviously, everyone looks at the UAP for the freedom-based policies, but there's a lot of stuff in there that makes perfect sense. They're the only party that has got a real policy on how to get other countries to pay down our national debt. They're the only party that's got a real policy on how to move people out of cities and to regions. Everyone else says we're investing in regions, but they don't actually give incentives for people to move to the regions. As far as policies go, so far, my values mostly align with UAP so far. All right, and last but not least, the last party, and look, there's plenty of parties too, but obviously we don't have time to go through all of them.
Yeah.
We're going to go through the Liberal Democrats. And the Liberal Democrats are, I don't even know how long they've been around for, but they're a party that's only really come to my attention primarily during the pandemic due to David Limbrick from Victoria. So, do you want to go through and read their...
I'll read it in order of what they've put here. Freedom from COVID alarmism, recall elections, debt and deficit, low flat taxes, voluntary superannuation, small business, cheap and reliable energy, decentralised education, free speech, freedom from surveillance.
So they're also the first party to have a policy on surveillance.
Which is what the technical side, which this has concerned me about the whole thing, no one's spoken about tech. No one has spoken about investment in tech.
Yeah.
Which is nutso to me.
Would you like to start with freedom from COVID alarmism?
Not particularly, but immediate changes, open schools and keep them open, never lock down again, peaceful protests must be allowed, vaccines should be available and voluntary, end the mask mandate, ensure Australians can get home. Remove border closures and travel restrictions, remove contact tracing and QR codes, remove social distancing, investigation of Australia's COVID response, that's a big one, end of emergency powers.
Yeah, cool. That's probably something we should keep in mind is that they've still all got these states of emergency. Every state's still in a state of emergency.
Yeah. But feds aren't.
Yeah, that's right. So recall elections. This is an interesting one. The Liberal Democrats believe government should be a servant, not a master. The response to COVID has demonstrated just how unaccountable governments can become between elections. So, in short, make recall elections available. Citizens must have the right to recall power-mad politicians. A petition signed by a set percentage of any given electorate should trigger a by-election, and a petition of a set percentage of the whole electoral roll should trigger a full election. Recall elections are rare in jurisdictions that permit them, but the simple fact that they are an option restrains politicians. I think this is one of those safeguard measures that you can have to actually prevent the power of lobbyists. Because one of the big issues that you see is that all the politicians, they promise you all the shit leading up to the election, they get elected, and then they change everything that they prioritise. A recall election prevents them from doing that. Enable a citizen's veto of any legislation. This is similar to the referendum thing. Citizens should also have the right to act as an effective third house of parliament with the power to recall any legislation. A petition signed by a percentage of the electoral roll to repeal any legislation should trigger a binding public vote on that legislation. I like that too. I like this as well. Make voting voluntary. Voting should be a right, not an obligation. Australia is one of the few democracies in which government compels people to vote in elections, and this forces political parties to pander to those who are apathetic or uninformed. Voluntary voting would empower informed voters and enable real leadership to emerge.
Interesting.
That is something that it was a concept I heard relatively recently, which I do agree with quite a lot, because unfortunately, you've said this before, leading up to the election, what do? They just both announce how they're going to give people money.
Yeah, put some big shiny billboards out.
That's right. And I would say more than 50% plus one votes in each Australian election are by voters who are not politically engaged, who do not care, who will just see who's going to pay me the most money. All right, you've just bought my vote.
Okay, so the next one is debt and deficit, and I'm just going to go to the key points. Cut 10% to all federal departments. Ouch. Cut a further 1% per year to federal departments. Okay, that's just an ongoing thing. Abolish duplicate departments. I like that.
Yep.
Defund ABC and SBS. Not sure. Or let them pay their own way through advertising, subscriptions, and donations from their adoring fans. Okay, abolish all nanny state advertising. The role of government should be to protect people's liberty, not mould their behaviour at their own cost.
Yeah, definitely agreed.
Abolish subsidies for renewable energy. Yeah, I don't agree with that. Remove the pointless tax / welfare churn. The current system, state and federal, involves hundreds of billions of churn where money is taxed from middle class families and given back to the same families as direct or indirect handouts. This sort of churn is inefficient. I agree with that.
Yeah,
immoral and the drain. Yeah, okay. Reduce politicians' pay by 10%. Wasteful decisions by irresponsible politicians have created our debt problem. The politicians should share the pain in helping pay down debt. Yeah. Abolish taxpayer funding of political parties. Yeah, absolutely. Get rid of that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think it is like just even the sheer wastage of. I remember a recent story about the Victorian state Labor government who got done by the Auditor General because they spent $13 million worth of taxpayer money on political advertising, which you're not allowed to do. And that was when Dan Andrews had his famous comment of, well, they're entitled to their opinion. Yeah. That's literally all that's happened. Yeah. There is no way that Australian taxpayer dollars should go towards political parties advertising to you to re-elect them to get their roles that then they get pay increases during a global pandemic.
Right. Just do the red.
Okay, so low flat income tax, a $40,000 tax-free threshold indexed to end bracket creep. Interesting. That's probably something that's not really been spoken about. The $18,000 tax-free threshold has not been touched for a long, long time, has it?
It's irrelevant, yeah.
A flat 20% income tax above $40,000.
Simplifies it.
Simplified, for sure. Low flat company tax. A flat company taxation rate of 20% on profit. Remove company tax on reinvested profits.
I like that, but I know that just benefits me.
Yeah, it is a way of companies to pay zero tax. But obviously, I guess reinvestment, you could...
But you're growing.
Yeah. All right, you want to go to the next one?
Okay, make superannuation voluntary. I will read this one. Employees should be given the option to taking their entire income as PAYG or opting out of superannuation contributions. Most employees will choose to continue building their retirement nest egg through superannuation, but others will invest, creating more jobs and growth. I think it's dangerous, but because I know better than anyone that Aussies don't want to invest, so they'll just use it.
Yeah, forced savings is a big thing for a lot of people.
No more increases to default superannuation rates. We reject the increase from 10 to 12% as dead weight on business and employees. I probably agree with that. I think 10% is enough. Like you don't need to force us to be investing class.
Yep.
And like we said, it all goes overseas anyway. Simplify the superannuation industry. Self-managed super funds are notoriously complex and there are too many barriers for new super funds to enter the market. We support the simplification of superannuation regulation, especially self-managed super funds that will give people more control over their investment decisions and financial future. Yep.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, small business. Major parties lost touch with the needs of Australian entrepreneurs and small business owners, blah, 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 red tape. Entrepreneurs must have freedom to flourish. Many new migrants with a limited knowledge of the English language get into business, and in many cases that will be because they simply aren't aware of what is and what isn't permitted. They just do things. We have the benefit of having centuries of history to see what works, with very few exceptions, when a nation has embraced a low-touch regulatory framework, the citizens flourish and the nation becomes strong. In 2017, the Institute of Public Affairs published a paper entitled Reducing Red Tape in Australia. The IPA found red tape costs the Australian economy $176 billion, 11% of GDP each year in foregone economic output. That's huge.
Yep.
Between 2013 and 2017, the Liberal government added 107,885 pages of regulation. Big business can cope with a regulatory burden, but is often crippling for new and small businesses. The IPA found the share of national income accruing to family-run and small businesses had declined from 26% in 1960 to just 9% in 2019. 1 in 2 out. For every new regulation issued, at least 2 prior regulations must be identified for elimination. This policy was effectively introduced in the United States in 2017. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Like, we've got so much old school laws that do not apply, but they're still there, which can hold you up. Remove retail trading hour restrictions. Businesses should be able to determine their own opening hours without government interference.
Yep.
That makes sense. Freeze and decentralise the minimum wage. The minimum wage is effectively a ban on employment for low skill and entry-level workers and directly causes unemployment. This is the side of minimum wage talk that is the opposite of Labor and the Greens, which doesn't get spoken about enough. Based on analysis from Dr. Andrew Lee, now Labor MP, the minimum wage is denying hundreds of thousands of people the chance to get a start in the workplace and the dignity that comes from having a job. Forbidding somebody from taking an $18 an hour job and then giving them even less in welfare to do nothing is nonsensical. The most effective and efficient way to help low-income people is to ensure they aren't caught in the income tax system and to drive productivity growth so that wages increase sustainably.
That's a hard one for people to wrap their heads around.
It is. But what that means is this. If you're running a small business and you've got the opportunity between giving the 18-year-old kid fresh out of school their start in the business world or giving a 30-year-old skilled person who has worked in a similar industry before, the same money, that 18-year-old kid's never going to get picked. So how do they get their foot in the door when they're restricted?
You've got to be price competitive.
That's right.
That's how I got my start. You know,
Yeah.
Well, I could never get my job again. Where I started in the industry, 20 grand a year doing 60 hours a week.
Yeah, that's right.
Look at me now. I own a fucking Ferrari.
Son. Australia currently has the highest minimum wage in the world, and this is particularly damaging for low-skilled workers and small businesses. When minimum wages make unskilled labour too expensive, larger businesses can afford to replace workers with machines, while small businesses just have to do without. State governments should be given the power to set their own minimum wages, allowing competition between them to find a more appropriate rate.
Okay. I'm reading Cheap and Reliable Energy, Free Market Energy, Government Funding, Ownership and Regulation of the Energy Sources only distort the market and reduce business confidence. All sources of energy should compete in the market on their own merits, reliability and cost. Yeah, I believe in a free market. Certainty for the energy industry. No net zero emissions target. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that. Abolish the renewable energy target. Okay, I don't agree with that either.
Is there anything else on there?
No.
Okay. Education. Allow schools to opt out of the national curriculum. Instead of an endless political battle over who gets to be the gatekeepers of knowledge, curriculum decisions should be devolved as close as possible to the individual level. Some schools would continue to use it, but others would opt out. More curriculum options means more choice and better matching to individual needs.
Yeah, Tasha's big on this because it doesn't work.
Yeah. Here's another one. Abolish centralised testing such as NAPLAN. A single measure of learning is a ridiculous notion, and it causes real useful learning to suffer as teachers teach to the test. Many teachers will say it is an impediment to quality education. Interesting point on that. I just saw there was a news article up by like 9news.com a few days ago, which was ranking the 150 best schools in Queensland. But what they don't say until later on in the article is what they're based off is the Year 9 NAPLAN results from 2019 or something. Right. So it's like you're trying to rank it based on a single test from Year 9 kids. That doesn't mean that, like, the big problem with education is we teach kids what to think, not how to think. We we rate them all on the same yardstick.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that meme of all the different animals sitting there and the teacher sitting at the front going, all right, now all of you climb that tree, and that's what you're going to be rated on.
All right, kick on.
Interesting. Fund students, not institutions. At every level, any government funding should go to the student through an education voucher. If an educational institution or childcare centre is offering a valuable service, they have nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
As people use their education voucher there willingly. Interesting. I like that. That was also a key of, we've spoken before about the differences between K-Rudd's stimulus policy and the JobKeeper scheme. K-Rudd's went directly to the people, JobKeeper went directly to businesses, and we agree that the going directly to the people is better.
Yep.
Allow new and innovative business models. Currently, there are 3 major cartels: the childcare industry, the school industry, and the university industry. Each of these are protected from competition by a raft of regulations that make it virtually impossible to start up and compete by using any different or innovative model. We want to see a market process where entrepreneurs can innovate and see what works.
Well, Michael Saylor, the patron saint of Bitcoin, has an online university that is free. And his view of the world is, if you can get the best of the best of the best teachers teaching a class at the best ever, he wants to make that available for everyone in the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you talk about women's issues, for example, everyone talks about how if you increase education in like third world countries, then women's outcomes always improve. So, yeah.
Okay, is that one?
Allow home education co-ops and university reform. The current university system has too little competition, too much power, and not enough free speech. Senior academics often act as the high priest for big spending politicians, being paid handsomely by the government to argue for ever more government power. Australia should retain a HEC-style delayed payment system to ensure that everybody can always access university, but there is no good reason that non-university students should be forced to subsidise the choices of relatively more wealthy university students. There should be less regulation on setting up new universities, and universities should have to compete in terms of price and quality to attract students.
Okay. Is that it?
Cool, that's all.
Okay, so I'm doing free speech. A free speech constitution amendment. Free speech is too important to be left to the whim of politicians. Liberal Democrats would campaign to add the following to the Australian Constitution. Parliament shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay. Abolish Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act and all similar legislation. Legislation such as 18C makes it unlawful to offend, insult, or humiliate, and hauls off who fall foul of it to and before a secret kangaroo court headed by bureaucrats of the Australian Human Rights Commission. It is a gross affront to free speech and the idea of a fair trial. Stop internet censorship. A decade and a half ago, consensus on the West was that it was necessary to censor radical propaganda, but this has led to an internet filter consisting of thousands of blocked websites for a wide range of reasons. Some of these people may be well-intentioned, but putting the power in the hands of government can rapidly turn into banning of anything that does not suit their political agenda. And let's be real, the internet is a worse place now than it was when it first opened.
100%.
Encourage a free and open internet. Much of the increasing political censorship imposed by tech companies is done in fear of regulation being targeted at them to tackle misinformation or fake news. This is particularly true in Australia, where platforms and page owners can be held liable for what is posted on by their users. A clear framework of no internet censorship by the government would take away much of the incentive for tech companies to censor their own content. Cool, I'm happy with that.
Last but not least, freedom for surveillance. From surveillance, which, as we said...
Hey, are you a government
freedom
shield?
for it, yeah. Only party that we've gone through to have policy on this. No digital identity laws. I've been banging on about this a lot recently,
not so much.
and especially to you, because you don't get it yet, but you will. No digital identity laws. Australians should be free to buy and sell and contract with each other, and free to move around and communicate with each other without having to show their papers and without intrusive governments tracking their every move.
Agree with that.
Abolish mass surveillance laws. Mass surveillance laws are an unnecessary invasion of privacy and have expanded excessively over recent decades. Whenever people can be made to be fearful, the government grabs even more power and money, which they never voluntarily relinquish.
Agree with that.
Stop government hacking and seizure. The government can add, copy, delete, or alter data on Australians' devices, take over online accounts, and gain access to private networks.
That's
Mentioned this
disgusting.
last week.
Yep.
These powers are unnecessary and enable the government to plant evidence on Australians. Devolution of surveillance laws to states and territories. After 9/11, surveillance laws were federalised, granting the federal government too much power over Australians. A return to states and territories handling surveillance laws distributes and dilutes power, ensuring Australians aren't indiscriminately targeted. Stop the collection of metadata. Despite government promises, metadata collection has expanded to local councils. The collection of metadata treats Australians as guilty without having committed a crime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Require warrants. I mean, we saw this stuff. Like,
yeah.
I mean, even the CDC in America just got done because they had to admit that they tracked Americans' phones to make sure that they were adhering to lockdowns. Like, and that sort of stuff happened over here too. We've already had the COVID Safe app be used by law enforcement to prosecute someone. Require warrants for targeted surveillance of individual Australians. Surveillance must only occur after a warrant has been approved for specific individuals. The judicial system is an important bulwark against government overreach. Friendly Geordies, that was a perfect example of this. It's still going through hearings at the moment because of the absolute abuse of power that the governments were using on him. No cash bans. Cash bans enable government surveillance by forcing Australians to pay for goods and services with traceable bank-issued payment methods, example debit cards. To protect privacy, Australians must be able to trade with each other without government surveillance. Agreed?
100%.
Stop attacks on encryption. The government continually attempts to undermine encryption through laws that weaken security and promotes backdoors. Australians must be able to talk to each other without surveillance. That is very, very important.
See, that was, the one person talking about tech.
Yeah. Focus government on improving its own cybersecurity. The government regularly fails its own cybersecurity audits. Improvement is required to avoid foreign governments compromising government systems. The effort the government spends spying on Australians is better spent protecting Australians.
Yeah.
Agreed? Free Assange. Julian Assange alerted the world to the dangerous power of the state in the age of the internet. We will advocate for his immediate release and repatriation.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, let's be really quick because this has gone on for way too long.
Let's summarise. So, Lib Dems, what are your thoughts?
Look, I'm pretty impressed. I had a feeling that they're just trying to touch some hot buttons on a radicalised base. Yeah. And me myself being one of them. So a lot of the stuff I like the tech stuff. That's.
I agree with you. I feel like a lot of their policies are reactionary based on the last 2 years and aren't necessarily about nation building.
Yep.
But I do like the fact that they're the only party really talking about tech. What does concern me is that the other parties, I don't think, aren't talking about tech because they don't understand it. I think they aren't talking about tech because they're actively using it. A lot of those, digital surveillance laws were passed in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So if they're not talking about it, it's because they're putting stuff in place to be used against the Australian people. I think something that is shockingly apparent is I've had the experience of living under a Liberal federal government and a Labor state government during the pandemic. And both of those governments, in my opinion, used their powers more against the Australian people than they used for the Australian people. That is very, very concerning for me. So, in summary, do you want to give a summary on what your thoughts are after actually reading through the policies? What do you reckon?
My overall feeling is that Labor's probably got the most comprehensive plan out of all of them. The one that don't necessarily align with my values. Yeah. I think that somewhere in... do you want me to rate them in order?
Oh, it's up to you. It depends on if that's what you want to do, but just give some overall thoughts.
I really like the minor ones.
Yeah.
There was some real practical stuff, and like I said, I think with what's happened in the last 2 years, I do think it's time that we do put a warning shot across the bow of the establishment. I think that's hugely important. I think it's something that we need to do. Look, it may hurt us in the very short term, but it's going to set us up better in the long term. Anyone who gets in, we're going to feel pain.
Yeah,
we're in a world of hurt, so I'll be preferencing the minor parties.
Yeah,
that is something I can say for sure.
So my thoughts on it are, I agree with you. Labor appears to have the most detailed plan on what they're going to do, but they don't necessarily have the detailed plan on how they're going to make the economics of it work. And that's always been the criticism of the Labor Party in the past. One thing that does really concern me is, and we can look at America as something we can learn from, is if you what the sales pitch is at the moment between Liberal and Labor is the Liberal Party is just saying you can't trust Labor with the economy. Like, you know me, you trust me. No, well, a lot of people don't, but that's the sales pitch. You can trust me, you don't know if you can trust them to manage it. So a vote for the Liberal Party is a vote for the norm to continue. If you look at what happened in America, obviously America had their FU to the system moment back in 2016 when they voted in Trump. And then in the last presidential election, Joe Biden's campaign message, which if he said anything at all, because he didn't say much, will be a return to normal. And the return to normal has not been a good thing for America.
No, it started a new war and supercharged inflation. It's
have had
supply chain
levels
issues
of illegal immigration, like all the issues that are happening in America. A lot of them got way worse after a return to normal, and that return to normal included the military-industrial complex literally starting a new war, and now they're at $40 billion invested into that. So my concern is if we go to the Liberals or the Labor Party, we are just inviting a continuation of the norm. And I'm not comfortable with that. I do believe it, from reading all of those, I really like a lot of the things that the Liberal Democrats are speaking about. And if they could pick a couple of seats up, I think that would be a great addition to Parliament. I do feel like my values and what I want for the future aligns probably the most with the United Australia Party. This is me speaking from, I guess, a parent's perspective of having 2 young children. I don't want them to have to pay off the debt that we created. I want them to have the same opportunities that we had. And in my opinion, UAP's got the best plan to pay down the debt and facilitate that to happen. So all in all, I'm with you. I would be looking at them and preferencing a lot of those other freedom parties. Obviously, if you guys do want to join in the comments, politics is a very polarizing subject.
Or reach out directly.
Reach out direct. I hope you guys are stuck around this long. It has been a long one.
It's been a monster. The least you could do is give us a like.
Like, share, subscribe. It is the most important election in recent memory. Make sure you make your vote count. I would suggest to all of you is to go and find somewhere to research how to vote correctly, because a lot of people don't understand it. Get yourself an understanding, understand how preferencing works. All the bullshit about the different parties preferencing different people, forget it. It's just noise. You control your preferences. However you number the boxes is completely up to you. Take control, participate in democracy, and let's build the country that we want.
And on that note, we'll see you next RDO.
Cheers, guys.